Hogwarts, the first capitalist of the magical world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 203. The Queen arrives. This dress is great. My little Karl is still so cute. Don't be so restrained. Turn around in your skirt and see. You need to improve your makeup and tone down your temperament a little. I know that the role you will eventually play may be different from your current makeup and appearance, but you also need some professionalism. Whatever clothes you wear, you have to portray the image you want. Wenda. Rosia looked at Karl in front of her and completely let herself go, treating him like a full-length Barbie doll. Karl's makeup is constantly changing, and because Karl's skin is very good, he doesn't need too much makeup to cover it up. Therefore, by making some minor adjustments to the eyes, hairstyle and other parts, Karl can create different styles. Sometimes she is a French lady in white, and sometimes she is a noble and beautiful woman from England. Of course, German Eastern female officer also needs to be tried, but Wenda Rosia's favorite is the one that Karl is wearing now. A typical American sweetheart, with smooth blonde hair falling like a waterfall, shining with sunshine and dancing in the wind. A few strands of hair fluttered across the delicate and picturesque face, and the eyes were like the azure ocean, deep and bright, revealing intelligence and innocence. The tall and elegant nose bridge, coupled with lips as soft and delicate as rose petals, makes people's heart beat faster at just one look. In addition, Carol has grown a lot taller in the past year, with a tall figure and skin as delicate and smooth as porcelain. Under the reflection of the sunlight, it exudes a faint luster, like a carefully carved work of art. In terms of clothing, she wore an American high school uniform blazer, a brown plaid pleated skirt, and a pair of over-the-knee white stockings, enough to attract everyone's attention. And I don't know if it was the makeup on the corners of the eyes that made Carol feel uncomfortable, or if it was because of something else. The slightly furrowed brows, just like pouring some slightly bitter chocolate on a sweet dessert. It enriches the taste and adds a bit of charm. It's perfect. You're so adorable, kid. Looking at Karl in front of him, Wenda Rosia could no longer suppress the joy in his heart and directly hugged him into his arms. He stretched out his hands and ruffled the other's smooth long hair, praising her desperately. You're cuter than you were before you were 10 years old. I can guarantee that any boy would be shocked when he sees you in this makeup. You will definitely go crazy for it and even fight for love on the spot. You don't even need to say anything. Just standing there is enough to attract everyone's attention. Then, I really have to thank you, Karl, who was tortured to death, said, gritting his teeth. But when he broke free from Wenda's embrace, he accidentally caught a glimpse of himself in the makeup mirror and couldn't help feeling a little amazed. But after being amazed, he also felt a little bit of fear. He was very aware of the terrifying charm of his body. With the addition of makeup, which is considered the most evil magic mastered by muggles, my face now looks like this. It is no longer possible to describe her beauty as stunning as a bewitching woman. She is simply an enchantress. He is now very suspicious. If I really appear in front of those people with this makeup, it will bring me a lot of trouble. So he immediately turned around and looked at Aunt Wenda, who was still quite proud of her makeup skills, and spoke in a firm tone. No, this is absolutely not okay. I have to change my makeup. I only have one request. Make my makeup look uglier. What did you say? Wenda put away the smile on his face, turned around and looked at Cole with an incredulous look, and looked him up and down carefully. He shook his head firmly. You are putting it in a difficult position for me. No matter how great an artist is, he can only make a piece of stone as ugly as possible. The carving is as close to the flower as possible. No one would try to turn the beautiful flowers into mud in the stinking ditch. I don't have that kind of artistic level, kid. Besides, your beauty doesn't need to be covered up. Let's put on the makeup that it deserves. After that, without allowing Karl to object, Wenda Rosia pushed him back onto the dressing table. She picked up the makeup brush beside her and spoke in a gentle tone. Close your eyes, child, and when you open them again, you will get what you want. Really? Karl looked up at the other person with some doubt. Wenderozia did not answer him, but just stroked the other's head with a smile. Like a skilled keeper, he calms the red panda with its fur standing on end. Karl did not resist at all. He closed his eyes quietly and felt a light and gentle movement on his face. Until I heard an exclamation of praise. It's perfect. Open your eyes. Karl slowly opened his eyes and looked at her in the matte mirror and couldn't help but exclaimed. Her face was like finely carved ivory with elegant and clear features, and her long black hair was tied into a complex and elegant bun. The feminine softness is restrained to bring a sense of toughness, with the finishing touch being Wenderozia in the left corner of Karl's eye. A beauty spot was drawn with a black eyebrow pencil, giving this already perfect face a chilling feeling. Put on this suit, the effect will be more obvious. Wenderozia took out a set of black witch robes from the closet beside her, which was different from the gorgeous long dresses she had worn before. The color of this dress is deep black, and it looks even more elegant when paired with patterns embroidered with pure silver. Karl took his clothes and walked into the dressing room nearby. After changing his clothes, he came to the matte mirror again. With the help of a pair of red high heels on his feet, Karl, who is already tall, looks even more oppressive. The black wizard robe was embellished with intricate embroidery and sparkling gems, with the symbol of the Deathly Hallows on the left chest. The matte that sets off Karl's current look brings a sense of royal dignity and majesty. I feel like something is still missing. Karl looked at himself in the mirror and said thoughtfully. Then he took out the frameless glasses that he had used to hide his identity from his ring. When this pair of frameless glasses is worn on the high bridge of the nose, it is as if a bright north star suddenly lights up in the dark sky. The pair of blue eyes hidden by the glasses no longer had any trace of gentleness. Those eyes were like the ice of Siberia, containing only endless coldness. That's much better. Karl, who was wearing glasses, nodded with satisfaction. This matte was in line with the temperament of a leader. There is enough sense of oppression and alienation, which should be able to avoid some trouble. But just when Karl looked at himself in the mirror, he couldn't help but admire himself. Wenderozia looked at the boy in front of him and suddenly said with a smirk, "It is indeed beautiful, but it is useless to admire it by yourself. Beautiful flowers need viewers to see them. Let us invite some audience. And as to your appearance, I think Mr. Diggory is the best person to speak of." Chapter 204. The Golden Whirlwind Captures the Dumb Tree. No, absolutely not. Karl, who had just been admiring himself in the mirror, suddenly panicked and picked up the matte remover beside him and wanted to pour it on his face. But just as he stretched out his hand, Wenderozia gently waved her wand, and the wardrobe and dressing table standing on both sides it automatically deforms and folds immediately, turning into two LV women's shoulder bags. Little Karl, this is not up to you. I must let everyone see the fruits of my labor. Besides, it's just for work. Why are you so flustered? Isn't he your subordinate and comrade in arms? Wenderozia put away the two LV women's handbags and looked at Karl with a playful look on her face. Isn't this also for confidentiality's sake? The fewer people who know about this, the better. Karl wanted to make some excuses. Wenderozia didn't want to say anything more and just shouted into the air. But call Mr. Diggory, as you wish, my dear lady. A response came from the air, and the house elf hiding in the dark quickly teleported to Cedric's room. He apparated directly into the living room with Cedric, who looked confused. Karl could only sit in his previous position, trying hard to turn his head away and keep quiet so as not to attract attention. "What's up, ma'am?" Cedric was brought to the living room by the house elf. Looking at the strange aunt in front of me with a smile on her face, I was still a little confused about the situation. "Don't be so nervous, kid. You must be Mr. Cedric Diggory. My name is Wenderozia." Wenderozia greeted Cedric gracefully and waved him over. Karl, who was hiding nearby and observing secretly, was muttering frantically in his mind, "This is your first time meeting her, so be careful, idiot, and don't just do whatever you're told to do." But his prayers seemed to have no effect, and Cedric stood there thinking for a while. He immediately walked over obediently and said excitedly, "You are Aunt Rosia. I've heard Karl talk about you. It's over." Carlton felt something was wrong. "Oh, that's what little Karl said about me. Wenderozia had a gentle smile on her face, but the look she gave Karl secretly seemed much harsher. It was as if she might go berserk at any time if Cedric's answer didn't satisfy her. Cedric, however, did not notice the change in atmosphere at all, and answered with his inherent honesty and seriousness. He always calls you a respectable lady, and says that you are like a mother to him. Although she is very old, she is still beautiful and elegant, but she is very strict. When it gets angry, it's like a terrifying tiger. It's over. Karl felt hopeless in an instant. Wenderozia turned to look at Karl beside him and said gently, he is very old, very severe, like a terrible tiger. Do you hear me, my dear lady? That gentleman actually described me like that. You must teach Mr. Hohenzollern a lesson in future competitions. It was only then that Cedric noticed that there was a girl in a black robe sitting next to Wenderozia. Driven by curiosity, he couldn't help but stretch his neck to see what the other person looked like. As a result, the other party suddenly turned around and stared at him with an angry face. As a result, just a glance at each other, Cedric couldn't help but stand there in a daze. His mouth slowly opened wider and his expression became more and more exaggerated, as if he was completely stunned. Wenderozia looked at the expression on the boy's face and felt very satisfied. As a result, she just wanted to introduce Carol's current identity to the other party. Cedric suddenly pointed his finger at Karl and said, "Carol, how did you become a girl?" The air froze in an instant, and Wenderozia looked at Cedric in disbelief. Karl, wearing a black wizard robe and frameless glasses, shines like a queen, with a face as clean as jade. It is visible to the naked eye that it slowly turns red starting from the base of the neck. After a long silence, he stared at Cedric and roared with a red face, "Forget everything you saw, and don't tell anyone about it, or you will pay a terrible price." "Why?" Cedric looked at Cole with a puzzled look on his face, scratched his head, and then said seriously, "It's not something shameful. It's just dressing up as a girl. Doesn't Mr. Potter often do this in school, and you helped him? I had long thought that you would also know this technique, but I didn't expect you to experience it yourself. Besides, it's so beautiful. Why don't you tell others about it? I think other students would definitely like to see such a beautiful scene." "Shut up," Karl roared. That touching and beautiful face is as red as a plump and delicious cherry, making people want to take a bite at first sight. Seeing such an interesting scene, Wenderozia had already covered her face with her hands, laughing uncontrollably, but at the same time she wanted to continue teasing this interesting child. She walked slowly behind Cedric, put one hand on Cedric's shoulder, and pointed at Karl, whose face was flushed with embarrassment. With the other hand, asked deliberately, "Mr. Diggory, you are an honest child, which I admire immensely. I asked the house elf to bring you here. There is no reason. I just want to ask you a question sincerely, Miss Hohenzollern. Does it make you feel excited hearing this?" Cedric was completely stunned, and he also realized that what he had said before seemed a little inappropriate. He immediately waved his hands and explained hurriedly, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I seem to have been a little rude just now. I can't comment on Carol's current condition. Sorry, I think I should go first. It's such a shame. It seems our little Karl isn't charming enough." Wenderozia grabbed Cedric, who was trying to escape, and said deliberately, "No, it's not like that." Cedric was suddenly panicked, and his single-core pumpkin brain began to work in overload again. Wenderozia saw the other party's predicament and deliberately spoke in a seductive tone, "If you can't make a comment, just watch it for a while longer. I believe in your honesty." Cedric, whose brain was already confused, was tempted by this and couldn't help but look at Karl again. Looking at the other person's slender waist, charming red lips, delicate facial features and fair skin. And the most important thing is the blue eyes hidden behind the glasses. Those eyes are so beautiful. Just one look is like sinking into the sea, unable to extricate yourself. So beautiful. What? While appreciating the work, Cedric unconsciously gave his own evaluation. Hearing this, Karl couldn't hold back any longer. He suddenly roared loudly, turned around and ran out the door as fast as a golden whirlwind. Cedric stood there like a log until a gust of golden whirlwind blew past him. When the flying golden hair brushed against his face, He realized that he seemed to have just done something very stupid. But the fragrance coming from his nose made him feel that sometimes stupidity was not necessarily a bad thing. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 205 Cedric DOESN and -039, Tino German. I'm so tired. Why do I have to learn those etiquettes? Am I not their leader? I'm not their dancing partner. There's no point in learning those court etiquettes. As soon as Karl entered the room, he jumped up and lay on his bed in a big litter shape, complaining madly to the ceiling. This is also a helpless move. After all, how can you just slap someone against the wall after they just kissed your hand when you first met them? Although you can use magic to change your voice, your temperament and demeanor are indeed a little different. Cedric followed him into the room and muttered quietly after closing the door he was talking about a rehearsal this morning. According to Grindelwald's plan, a grand banquet will be held in the castle in a week. Karl's character, Theodora Grindelwald, will also appear in front of the entire European wizarding world on that day. In order to avoid any mistakes, Wenda Rosier specially arranged a rehearsal yesterday and called a young man from the French Rosier family. He met Karl in advance, but after just a greeting, Karl slapped him against the wall. The force was so great that it even smashed the opponent's head into the wall and could not be pulled out. Cedric was also watching the scene that day and was also scared. As soon as he finished speaking, Karl jumped up, knelt on the bed and said angrily, "Is that a hand kiss? Who would stick out their tongue and lick the back of someone's hand when performing etiquette? I didn't kill him on the spot. I was restrained enough." "What?" Cedric suddenly shouted. "Why didn't you tell me then? Let's find a way to kill that guy now." "Why are you so angry?" Karl looked at Cedric with some confusion, his eyes full of suspicion as he saw Cedric throwing his body in a rage. Cedric seemed to have realized what was happening. He coughed a few times to suppress his anger and changed the subject. "I'm just a little angry. After all, a gentleman shouldn't act so rudely towards a girl he meets for the first time. No matter what, I can't." He originally wanted to continue emphasizing his understanding of a gentleman, but what happened was that he ended up saying this while he was speaking. I inadvertently glanced at Karl sitting on the bed. I don't know when his hair had been loosened, and his black wizard robe was also taken off and thrown on the ground casually. Under the moonlight outside the window, his long golden hair flowed like a waterfall, shining with a hint of luster, like a brilliant galaxy sprinkled from heaven. And at the end of the Milky Way, the long neck and collarbone form an illusory scene. If it weren't for the Adam's apple at the throat. Cedric may have forgotten at this moment that the person in front of him was his good brother, and he didn't dare to look down. After all, that was a very rude behavior, and the anger in my heart also dissipated a lot. He even began to understand why the poor guy who was slapped against the wall behaved in such a disrespectful manner. But even so, when he thought back to the scene that Karl had just described, he couldn't help but get angry. He stretched out his hands and slapped his face hard, forcing himself to calm down. But the effect seemed very limited. He always couldn't help but want to look at Karl's side. Helplessly, he could only keep fanning his face with his hands, trying to suppress the irritation in his heart with the pain. "What are you doing?" It wasn't until a voice sounded from behind Cedric that the idiot stopped his stupid behavior. But when he turned his head and looked, that feeling of irritation instantly surged up in his heart again. He quickly turned his head and stammered, "Karl, how can you just wear pajamas? What the hell?" Hearing this, Karl was stunned for a moment, then looked at his clothes feeling that there was no problem. He simply held Cedric's big head with both hands and forced him to turn his head. Then he stared at the other person and said angrily, "Look at my face now. I'm your boss, your school director, and your friend Karl Hohenzollern. I am no longer the lady who acted with you. Stop having those dirty and shameless thoughts. This is my bedroom. I can wear whatever I want. Don't forget why you are here. Start teaching German if You have such unreasonable thoughts again. I will smash your pumpkin brain into pieces and make pumpkin pie." After saying that, Carol directly lifted Cedric by the back of his collar and threw him to the desk beside him like a naughty kitten. Then he took out his wand and cast a spell of immobilization on the other party and then used a levitation spell to move 2 huge German dictionaries. He spread it out in front of the 2 of them, then pointed at the contents on it and spoke calmly, "Hurry and continue. We don't have much time. I must do my best within this week." I learned all the German expressions. To be honest, I felt helpless. There were 2 pure Germans in the castle. They are unwilling to teach me German and insist on asking you, a half-baked Englishman, to do this job. I really don't know what they are thinking. What Carol complained about was one of the preparations during these days, learning German, even though he was a pure German by blood point. But he grew up in the United States after all, and Wenderosia did not give him any German education point, although using the memory palace, he can quickly complete the writing and vocabulary mastery of German through the dictionary point, but that is only limited to recognizing words and writing. The spoken language used for communication still requires some learning point. Karl had long understood that the memory palace in his mind was like a huge AI model and required sufficient learning materials. Only in this way can one complete one's deep learning. Originally, this was just a trivial matter. Grindelwald and Aunt Rosia, they all speak authentic German, and after a week of communicating with each other, they can handle basic speeches. But the 2 men decided at the same time that Cedric, who only knew ordinary German, would teach Carol to communicate in German. This made him unable to figure out why Cedric, who was sitting next to him, was trapped in a chair by the immobilization spell. Looking at Karl in front of him, he couldn't help but feel secretly happy. The blonde boy was wearing spotless white silk pajamas under the moonlight. It shined so brightly. The 2 of them exchanged simple German words. As the moonlight slowly passed, the darkness of the night gradually thickened. Karl, who had been busy all day, yawned and fell asleep on his desk with his hands under his head. Seeing this, Cedric closed the thick German dictionary and wanted to leave quietly, but he found himself helplessly under the immobilization spell. The other party seemed to have forgotten to untie it, so he could only support his head with his hands, lean on the desk, and quietly look at the blonde boy in front of him. Under the moonlight, the breeze blew through the blue tulips on the windowsill, and Cedric couldn't help but blurt out, "Du bist der Mond, der Minen, der Held, aber ich fürchte mich, dich himmlisch zu verlieren." Chapter 206, A Midsummer Night's Dream. The sunlight was like golden fire, pouring down from the top of the sky, coating the castle with a layer of brilliant glow. The breeze blew from the small window onto Cedric's face, waking him from his deep sleep and making him climb up from the soft big bed. After a simple wash, the boy began his day's work by folding the messy sheets and quilts neatly. Helping some irresponsible guy to collect the discarded clothes and put them in the laundry basket nearby. Finally, after tidying up the desk, I poured a pot of clean water on the pot of blue tulips on the windowsill. A week has passed in this monotonous and repetitive day. During this week, apart from tutoring Carol in German at night, Cedric usually sits in his room reading in his free time. Or after lunch, he could listen to Grindelwald talk about his past. He also wanted to go to the reception room to see how Cole was learning etiquette. But after he couldn't help laughing several times while watching, Karl punished him very cruelly one night. As a result, when he woke up that morning, he could hardly get out of bed and his muscles were so sore all over. Thinking of this, Cedric couldn't help but rub his shoulders. 3 hours of strength training was really terrible. Fortunately, apart from that night, he had gained a lot this week. He was a little worried about today's banquet. After all, in all the education he received in his past life, Grindelwald was known as one of the most dangerous dark wizards. He is the sworn enemy of Headmaster Dumbledore, but since lunch every day, he has been listening to the stories about his past told by the German old man. He suddenly realized that things did not seem to be the case between Headmaster Dumbledore and the old man. They are not the Mortal enemies as rumored, but rather a little difficult to talk about point. Whenever he talked about the memories of that summer, Grindelwald's eyes always revealed an irrepressible joy point. The old man spoke clearly and eloquently, and he always talked endlessly when recounting his memories. A story that happened that summer was told by him like a midsummer dream in a novel, but at the end of the story point the old man would always suddenly fall silent. And beneath his calm appearance, he revealed an unspeakable sadness recalling the other person's expression at that time. Cedric couldn't help but sit on the edge of the bed, looking out the window with empty eyes. The summer sun in mid-July was scorching point. Looking at the Alps mountains shrouded in the sun outside the window, my thoughts have drifted to who knows where point. Perhaps it was a flashback to the end of that same summer. On the train to Hogwarts I pushed open the door of the carriage and saw the blonde boy sitting next to the window, shrouded in sunlight point. He had such a perverse personality, always with a smug smile on his face. And his head of golden hair looked like gold in the sunlight point. Perhaps at that moment, he began to understand what Grindelwald said. When I walked down the stairs from my aunt's attic, I saw him standing at the door. He was covered by the sunlight outside the door at the time. Just by looking at each other, I knew that my fate had taken an irreversible turn. Thinking back to this, Cedric felt that his brain seemed to be overworking. Fortunately, there was a knock on the door at this time. Please come in. Cedric quickly stood up from the bed, straightened his clothes, and sat at the desk pretending to read a book point. The door was soon pushed open, and Aunt Wenderosia walked into the room slowly, holding a black men's suit in her hands. She placed the dress on the empty table next to Cedric, and said jokingly, while deliberately squinting at the boy in front of her, "Mr. Diggory really loves to learn. Of course, if the book is turned in a different direction, I think it might be easier to read. After all, it's an upside down book, so it's still hard to understand." Ah. Cedric was stunned at first, then he looked at the open book in front of him and realized that the book was upside down point. After quickly straightening the book, he looked at the lady in front of him with some embarrassment and said, "Excuse me ma'am, I was just thinking about something else. There's just too much going on these days. I need some time to digest this. The world I used to live in is not like this. I can't seem to adapt." At the end of his words, Cedric began to unconsciously confide in the lady in front of him. Wenderosia just smiled at the other person and spoke gently. "There's no need to feel lost, kid. You're a brave person, an ordinary person encountering a strange world on your own. The first thing that comes to mind is usually to run away, but you didn't choose to run away. Instead, you faced it bravely. You have done much better than many people, or maybe someone has tied your hands and feet. He forced you to stay in his world." No. Cedric was a little flustered, but just wanted to explain. Wenderosia took out a golden mask from her bag and placed it on top of the dress. "Well, if you have any inner thoughts, go talk to the person you want to talk to. It's no use talking to me. You are a very smart and honest child. You must have your own plans. Be brave to realize them. Tell me if you need help. By the way, remember to wear this mask when the party starts. After all, among those attending the banquet, there are also many wizards who serve as high-ranking officials in the Ministry of Magic of various European countries. Your identity also needs to be kept confidential." "I understand." Cedric nodded obediently, but turned to look at the golden mask and asked with some confusion, "Although, after listening to the memories told by that gentleman, I already know the relationship between Headmaster Dumbledore and that gentleman, but shouldn't the ministries of magic of various European countries be extremely hostile to the appearance of this gentleman? Why are they coming to this banquet? It's not complicated, kid." Wenderosia smiled disdainfully. "For you, sir, the ministries of magic of various European countries, there is no way to deal with it at all. They will always just follow the 4-step diplomatic strategy that Carol Jr. mentioned." "Which 4 steps?" Cedric asked curiously. Wenderosia deliberately pretended to be bureaucratic and spoke calmly. "Step 1. They'll emphasize that nothing happened. Step 2 is they'll say there was a little bit of a problem, but we don't have to do anything about it yet. Step 3. They'll say maybe we should do something, but nothing can be done. Step 4. They say, maybe we could have done something, but now it's too late. After the performance, when Dorosia smiled gently at the stunned Cedric, touched his big head, turned around and walked away while speaking, well, it's time for you to recover from your memories. Once you're dressed, have the house elf take you to the living room. Our respected young lady is finally going to make her debut today. Chapter 207. The fight before the banquet. From the moment he walked out of the room, Cedric was completely shocked by the scene before him. The road to the reception room is through a long corridor, which was covered with moss and extremely dark just yesterday. It has completely changed now. The moss on the ancient bricks and stones has been cleared away, and torches are used for lighting around. They were also all removed and replaced by a giant crystal chandelier weighing several tons hanging overhead. The light from countless candles, reflected by the crystal, illuminated the entire enclosed corridor. If there weren't no windows and air circulation around, Cedric would have thought it was daytime here. When you arrive at the entrance of the reception room, you will see extremely rich and luxurious decorations around it, including luxurious Baroque style stone carvings with gold foil. There are also two huge flags hanging on the left and right of the golden bronze gate. On the dark black flags, the symbol of Deathly Hallows is embroidered with pure silver silk thread. The bronze door slowly opened to the left and right, and Cedric put on the golden mask that he had prepared long ago. He composed himself and walked into the reception room with a high-spirited attitude, looking at everyone in the room through the holes in the mask. The reception room, which was comparable to the Hogwarts Great Hall, was already crowded with countless wizards wearing various strange robes, holding silver wine glasses. There were all kinds of strange drinks in there, including thick alcohol like blood, and sticky liquid like fermented mung beans. The most peculiar thing was an old witch. There was a lively toad floating in the wine in her cup. Cedric had never seen so many wizards gathered in one place for a banquet, except when Hogwarts started school. He couldn't help but start walking around out of curiosity, and as his observation deepened, he gradually began to use Professor Karl's observation method. They began to classify the wizards present. The most powerful and calm ones were undoubtedly the group of old men closest to the podium. Most of them have white hair and beards, hunched bodies, walking sticks in their hands, and wearing extremely gorgeous classical wizard robes. Most of them didn't have drinks in their hands, and apart from simple greetings, there wasn't much verbal communication between them. From time to time, he would look at the wizard on the other side with a complicated look. On the other side was a group of young wizards. Most of them were under 30 years old, wearing party dresses similar to those worn by muggles. They gathered in groups of 3 or 5, greeting each other and joking around, with warm applause and laughter breaking out from time to time. There were no strange drinks in their hands. Most of them were cocktails that muggles loved to drink. However, Cedric did not like that group of people, because there was a strange feeling in their eyes and words. He usually only felt this feeling from students of Slytherin College. In Karl's words, these people were very arrogant and liked to show off. They had a deep sense of contempt and hostility towards another group of young wizards who also attended the banquet, but whose family backgrounds were obviously not as good as his. The group of people did not stand with them, but stood on the other side, scanning the entire audience with cold eyes. What family are you from? Just as Cedric was observing silently, a proud voice suddenly came from behind him. He turned around and saw a boy in a flashy purple suit looking at him with a very strange look. Seeing that there was no response from him, the other party immediately asked in an impatient tone, "I'm asking you a question. You look pretty fancy dressed, so you must be a member of a pureblood family. My name is Kevin Lestrange. You come from a famous pureblood family in France. Where on earth are you from? Why are you wearing a mask and acting so mysterious here?" Cedric took 2 steps back, keeping a distance from the other party, and wanted to speak, but before he could open his mouth, that Lestrange pointed at another group of young wizards and spoke. "If you are not a wizard from a pureblood family, then please go over there. There is no place for you here. We do not welcome muggles like you to attend this banquet. To be honest, I'm the heir of Master Grindelwald. Inviting these dirty guys to the banquet is very incomprehensible to the original purpose of the establishment of the Saints Society. It is to lead the wizard revolution, to completely cut off our connection with the muggle world, and to return those dirty guys to their rightful place. And Now, she actually wrote in the invitation letter that all wizards are a force that can be united. It's really ridiculous. Having said that, the guy turned around and looked at the lackeys surrounding him and spoke in a very teasing tone. I heard that Master Grindelwald's successor is a girl. I wonder what she looks like if she has such childish ideas. I don't think it will be that pretty. I don't want my father to ask me to marry her. Then I will. The speech was interrupted forcibly, and in an extremely rude manner Cedric threw a right hook, hitting his opponent's face hard, with such force, that his face was distorted. His whole body flew out, and he fell into a baby-like sleep as soon as he lay on the ground. What happened? How dare someone start a fight at Master Grindelwald's banquet? Look at that guy. His whole face is swollen. Cedric's punch immediately attracted a crowd of onlookers, and everyone looked at Lestrange, who was lying on the ground. Immediately, everyone started talking. As one of the parties involved, Cedric remained silent and ignored the harsh words uttered by the lackey beside the other party. He turned around and ran towards the dining table. As he walked, he had already made a decision in his mind. He had to stay with this group of people today, even though they made him feel disgusted and disgusted. He must stay here, and the reason is very simple, because he discovered through his observation just now. The dishes on this table are richer than those on the opposite side. What is the motto of Hufflepuff? The world is big, but eating is the most important thing. As for the punch, he felt no psychological pressure at all. After all, he could completely understand it using Professor Karl's self-moral closed loop. I helped him escape a disaster. After all, if what that guy just said reached Karl's ears, I guess his end won't be much better than Voldemort, who was burned to ashes by Karl's killing curse. After figuring this out, Cedric dove into the snacks on the table and started eating like crazy under everyone's puzzled gazes. On the other side, Kevin Lestrange was slapped 4 or 5 times in a row by his furious father. He finally woke up, but started crying and screaming as soon as he opened his eyes. Father, you must help me to take revenge. The speech was interrupted again, and still in a very similar way. The father slapped his son on the other side of the face. Then he grabbed the other person's neck with his hands, pointed at the door and yelled, "Shut your stinky mouth, and come with me to greet the new master." Chapter 208. A glance is worth 1,000 words. She is not my master, Kevin Lestrange said somewhat dissatisfiedly, even if she is Mr. Grindelwald's heir. But that's just because she inherited the blood of the Grindelwald family. It doesn't mean that she naturally has the right to inherit the Saints organization. We would never have acknowledged this if she wasn't qualified. Keep your voice down. Louis Lestrange nervously covered his son's mouth and looked around cautiously. As the patriarch of the French Lestrange family, this handsome and strong middle-aged man, in addition to feeling scared, he also felt a little helpless about his son's reckless behavior. He knew that his son was not an exception, and that most of the young wizards around them held the same viewpoint. The half-century of Master Grindelwald's self-imprisonment has caused the Saints organization to lose its former glory. The organization is extremely divided internally, and there is no need to elaborate on the conflicts between pureblood families and civilian wizards. Even the pureblood families, who were previously staunch supporters, are now divided into multiple factions. Most of the earliest elders who followed Master Grindelwald have passed away, and the rest are too old to have much influence. The second group is the middle-aged people who grew up during the revolution, led by Master Grindelwald. Most of them were already patriarchs of their respective families, but after all, when they came to power, Master Grindelwald had already imprisoned himself in Nuremberg. He did not participate in the revolution, and his loyalty to the organization came more from his admiration for Grindelwald himself. Now, most of them would not have much resistance to being loyal and obeying a new successor to Grindelwald out of their admiration for Grindelwald himself. However, it would be a big question mark if they were asked to devote their family's property and power to the next revolution like the first batch of elders did. As for the last group, they were undoubtedly the young wizards represented by his son. They are looking forward to a girl who is about the same age as themselves, or even younger than themselves, inheriting this legendary organization. Most are very hostile. Recalling this, Louis Lestrange couldn't help but sigh deeply, turning to look at his son and patiently persuading him, Kevin, no matter what your little group is planning, I hope you won't do anything today. The master is announcing his successor today. This is an important ceremony. If you dare to cause trouble, so what will be the consequences? I don't think I need to say much. I want to remind you that the master once almost burned the entire city of Paris to ashes with a single spell. I understand, father. Kevin Lestrange nodded reluctantly, but still muttered to himself, I just don't believe that a little witch can be so powerful. She must be an ugly one. Words become extremely pale at this moment. It was just an inadvertent glance back at the young boy, who was so noisy just now. For a moment, he seemed to lose the ability to speak, and under the gaze of everyone, the golden bronze door that had been closed for a long time opened. Being slowly pushed open from outside, Theodora Grindelwald, played by Karl, walked slowly into the banquet hall. Under the reflection of the chandelier above her head, her high golden bun looked like a dazzling crown, which directly established her cool and elegant temperament. But the few strands of hair hanging between the ears and eyebrows reveal a youthful vitality and cuteness. The blue eyes hidden behind the frameless glasses are as clear, bright and deep as the ice in the deep sea. It makes people feel cold, but also makes them yearn for it. The black dress, which set off her tall figure, had patterns embellished with pure silver thread. As she moved, she shone with dazzling light, like stars shining in the night sky. Each of her steps seemed so firm and powerful, her blood-red high heels stepping on the white marble floor. There were bursts of crisp sounds, as if a band hidden in the dark was beating out heart-stirring drum beats under everyone's gaze. She crowned herself with her unique accompaniment, so beautiful. Kevin Lestrange, who had been staring blankly with his mouth wide open for a long time, thought for a long time before he came up with this adjective. Louis Lestrange looked at his son like this and hit him on the back of the head angrily. Look at your achievements. I have heard you say this more than once before I met this young master. She is an ugly girl, and you boasted to your classmates that no matter how beautiful she is, you will never surrender to her. After just one meeting, you couldn't say a word. You are really my good son. Do you want to do something else now? No. More. Kevin Lestrange immediately patted his chest and said, that's good. I told you long ago that if this girl wasn't qualified, how could the master announce his successor so loudly? Listen to your father more. I'm an experienced person and I have more experience in handling things than you do. If you encounter any problems in your life in the future, you need to communicate with me more often. I will give you help and guidance. Seeing his son so well behaved, Louis Lestrange was very satisfied. Just like any other father, he started chattering to his son, telling him some big principles and bragging a little. But just when he was about to talk about the glorious deeds of my father in the past, Kevin Lestrange, who had been nodding obediently, suddenly looked at his father seriously and spoke. Father, I have made up my mind. I'm willing to acknowledge her as my master, no matter what you say from now on. I am willing to do all that. I have only one condition. I want to marry her. What did you say? Louis Lestrange, who was originally quite happy, immediately screamed out of control when he heard his son say this. Fortunately, everyone's attention was attracted to Cole at this time, and they found that no one was paying attention to him. He quickly pulled the boy to a secluded place aside and cast magic to block out the surrounding sounds. He simply raised his right hand and slapped the opponent 3 times in the face. Still not feeling satisfied after that point, he touched the other person's forehead again and asked angrily, what the hell is wrong with your brain? If you're not sick, just shut up. As he spoke, Louis Lestrange became angrier and angrier and more afraid, so he simply took his son's hand and hurried towards the fireplace next to the living room. Let's go now. Dad will take you to see a doctor and have a good check on your brain. I'll take care of it, no matter how much it costs. Stop scaring me here, okay? I'm not going back. Kevin Lestrange struggled hard to break free from his father's pull and said indignantly, there will be a dance after the banquet. If you don't want to help me, just go and ask her to dance yourself. After saying that, he broke the magic and returned to where he had just stood. Louis Lestrange stood there blankly, looking at his son's back, and cast another soundproofing spell. A loud roar. Rebellious son. Chapter 209 Karl 039 S gaze and CEDRIC and dash 039 S meal. On the other side, Karl, standing at the highest point of the banquet hall, was scanning the entire audience with a scrutinizing gaze. The pair of blue eyes hidden behind the glasses whistled like the cold wind of Siberia. All wizards who were scanned by these eyes, regardless of age or status, just like a forest in winter, it put away its flamboyance at that moment. The green leaves were covered by the wind and snow, and there was only solemnity after the strong wind. People looked at the girl in front of them cautiously, their hearts filled with uneasiness. Before coming, they were concerned about this heir of Grindelwald. Most of them do not have much affection for each other, and the elderly are worried that the other party is too old to shoulder such an important responsibility. Middle-aged people are afraid that the other person's appearance will affect their current status and wealth. Needless to say, the young people are like a group of lions that have just reached adulthood. Their abundant energy makes them eager to show themselves. There is deep hostility towards being led by someone of the same age as oneself. But now, everyone lowered their heads, afraid to look into those eyes, and those eyes were so beautiful and moving. But in their hearts, these eyes became somewhat unbearable to look at, and they began to recall the legend of the Jedwo family. Legend has it that members of the Grindelwald family have the ability to see through people's minds and predict the future. They began to get nervous and afraid, fearing that their previous publicity and speculation would be discovered by the other party. In just 1 minute, all the magic families in Europe had bowed to the queen before them. But all this was just their imagination. Karl knew that his eyes did not have the ability to see through people's hearts. Even if there was, he had no interest in seeing through these guys' inner thoughts. He looked around the entire place, just looking for someone. Because he found that from the moment he entered the banquet hall, everyone's eyes were focused on him, except for one. He kept searching among the crowd, and finally found the figure he had been looking for at a dining table. Cedric had taken off his funny golden mask and was hiding in the corner of the dining table. He stared fiercely at the honey roast chicken in front of him with a knife and fork. The cream residue at the corners of his mouth showed that this fierce battle had been going on for some time. Looking at the other person's funny look, Karl couldn't help but find it a little funny. The moment when his eyebrows were bent and his lips were slightly opened. There was a cry of surprise from the audience, and all the young people looked at their queen on the stage with a sincere smile. In that instant, the cold wind of Siberia blew away, and the withered winter forest in my heart returned to the warm summer almost in an instant. However, their queen didn't seem to care about them. She kept staring at a corner and seemed to get no response. After looking for a long time, he frowned slightly and snorted coldly, then turned his head and looked at everyone present and spoke with some temper. According to convention, before this banquet officially begins, I need to give a speech to explain my ideals to everyone present. But I don't like doing this. I think words are always pale, even the strongest words in the world. It's not as good as a killing curse in real life. So I decided today that I won't give any speech. The day after tomorrow, in Berlin, I will use direct actions to announce my arrival to the European wizarding world and to the entire wizarding world. So, please do your own thing. The banquet will begin now. After saying that, Karl took the champagne from the side, raised it above his head, and drank it all in one gulp. With the drink, the banquet officially began, but the crowd did not seem to intend to move. They were still arranged in 2 neat rows, and Karl had no intention of greeting them or saying any words of comfort. He sat directly in the chairman's seat on the stage, enjoying a glass of red wine and looking at the people below with a cold face. Just like that, after a full 10 minutes had passed, this banquet, which was not going very smoothly, finally began awkwardly. Unlike the usual noisy banquets with people toasting each other and chatting, the whole banquet was eerily quiet. The attendees seemed to have completely lost any interest in the carefully prepared food, and most of them only had a glass of wine in their hands. They gathered in groups of 3 or 5, discussing in very low voices. Most of the elderly people showed satisfied smiles, while the middle-aged people all had sad faces. The situation of young people was completely different. The girls attending the party gathered together and looked at Karl on the stage with indignant eyes, but when he saw Karl, He was holding a glass of red wine in his right hand, crossing his legs, and smiling disdainfully. That smile and the red high heels at the base of her white thighs immediately killed all the jealousy and resentment. After all, when the level difference is too big, no matter how hard you try, it will just be a joke in the eyes of others. Needless to say, the group of boys had never shifted their gaze from the moment Cole walked into the banquet hall. They all stared at him, but Karl, who was sitting in the chief's seat, didn't notice that the other party didn't seem to be paying attention to them. His eyes were fixed on a corner, where the only person in the entire banquet was enjoying the food. Cedric simply wiped his mouth with a white napkin, and then ate a whole honey roasted chicken. This guy turned his target to a huge tomahawk steak, swinging the knife and slashing it with an unstoppable force. Karl couldn't help but smile again. Just this one smile was enough to destroy the friendship of more than 10 years between so many boys in the audience. The banquet did not last long. After half an hour, the food on the table disappeared without a trace under the cover of silver light. The classical and elegant waltz sounded from far away in the entire reception room. The restaurant where everyone was toasting each other turned into a dance floor in an instant. All the participants stood in a circle in unison, but no one stood in the center of the stage to dance. The young girls looked downcast, while the young boys were all eager to try. But the fire burning in my heart encountered the blue ice the moment I raised my head. No one dared to invite Karl to dance the first dance. On the other side, Cedric hadn't made any move at this time. He was just sticking a German sausage with a fork. I was tasting it with gusto until a voice came from behind me. Mr. Diggory, it seems that the dishes for this banquet are very much to your taste, but have you forgotten that you still have work to do? Cedric turned around suddenly and saw Wenderosia staring at him with the eyes of a disappointing son. He quickly put down the German sausage in his hand, scratched his head awkwardly and said, "Oh, sorry ma'am, I'm a bit." Before he could finish his words, Cedric suddenly and hastily put on the golden mask beside him, and then acted like a well-fed bull. He pushed the crowd aside and ran madly towards the center of the stage, because just now a trembling greeting came from the center of the stage. "Dear Miss Theodora Grindelwald, my name is Kevin Slatrange. I wonder if I have the honor to serve you. I invite you to this first dance." Chapter 210, The Second Dance of Identity Exchange. Kevin Lestrange stood in the center of the stage surrounded by the crowd, bending down and extending his hand gracefully, his movements as perfect as a statue. Unfortunately, the statue seemed to be trembling under the gaze of everyone. He had never been so nervous as he was at that moment. The emotions in my heart are even more difficult to express. Filled with immense desire and unspeakable fear, he felt as if he was standing on the gap between heaven and hell, just waiting for a response from the angel above him. Declare yourself ascending to heaven, or completely falling into hell. The waiting time was so anxious until Cedric rushed into the center of the stage like a bull. Kevin Lestrange, who was still maintaining his position, was knocked to the side. It wasn't until his face touched the ground that this guy finally reacted. He quickly got up and turned around to glare at me. As a result, when he turned around, he heard the sound of his own heart breaking. Karl, who had just been sitting in the chief's seat, walked slowly towards Cedric in his blood-red high heels, looking at the mask that was crooked because of being put on in a hurry, and the black dress that seemed to be just right last night, but now seemed half a size too small. He sighed helplessly and then looked at them as if they had seen a ghost. Karl took out a white napkin from his ring with his right hand and firmly pinched Cedric's chin with his left hand. Forced the other person to raise his head and then gently and carefully wipe the cream from the corner of his mouth. Pay attention to your image. I don't want my dance partner to be a fool who only knows how to lower his head to eat and is unwilling to appreciate any beauty. Karl complained quietly and threw the napkin directly into Cedric's face. Then he turned around and walked back to the chief's seat and sat down, looking at Cedric, who was still in a daze in the audience with a strange look. Cedric looked at the white napkin in his hand and the puzzled eyes of the people around him, and stood there scratching his head at a loss until a familiar voice suddenly sounded in my ear. "Hurry up and ask him to dance. What are you doing standing there?" It was not until he heard the sudden voice in his mind that Cedric reacted. He quickly bent down, stretched out his right hand and said, "Dear Miss Grindelwald, I wonder if I have the honor to invite you to dance. His movements were awkward and funny. Compared with the previous one, he was like a clumsy ugly duckling point. Although Cedric lowered his head and looked at the ground, he could feel that everyone's eyes were focused on him point, including the person next to him. The feelings of resentment, envy, and helplessness were almost solidified point like sharp swords. They pierced his entire body into a hedgehog point. He began to feel a little scared, remembering Cowl's vengeful nature. And also remembering that he was so busy eating that he didn't pay attention to his entry point. He now began to seriously doubt whether Carol was doing this just to embarrass him or whether he was really angry point. The pumpkin's single core brain began to dwell on the matter and kept thinking about it point so much so that he didn't even notice that a white and slender right hand had stretched out in front of him point until a complaining voice was heard. How long do you want me to stay here with my hands outstretched? Cedric looked up quickly and saw that gorgeous face still had that wicked smile on it point. The girl has not yet followed the tradition of the dance and is waiting for her partner to hold her right hand. Instead, he pulled the other person up from the ground with extraordinary force, put his head close to the other person's ear, and whispered in a low voice, "This is the only time I've shown favor to someone who didn't give me face. Don't be shameless again. We've danced once before. I led you last time. This time it's your turn. Don't forget the role you played today, me." Cedric's single core pumpkin brain froze the moment he felt a warm breath coming from his earlobe point. After saying one word, he stood there like a piece of wood point. If it weren't for the golden mask on his face, everyone would be able to see how red a baked pumpkin pie is. Karl looked through the holes in the mask and saw the fear in the eyes inside and smiled helplessly point. He continued to whisper instructions in the other's ear. "Don't feel any concerns. It's just a great performance. In the years to come, we have to learn how to play the role we should play. Performing is a necessary step for a person to grow, but it does not mean that we have to give up our inner innocence and courage. You have a mask on your face. Don't be afraid. First step, put your arms around my waist, you fool." Cedric's brain froze and he didn't know what to do. Fortunately, he was good at listening to other people's opinions. After Cal gave the order, the pumpkin processor robot immediately began its actions. He forcefully held the other person in his arms, and the moment the two black dresses pressed against each other, it seemed that someone could hear it at the scene point. Just like a porcelain shop being smashed, the sound of shattering continued to be heard point. But all this has nothing to do with the two people in the center of the stage, accompanied by classical and elegant dance music point. Carol, wearing a black suit, is like the brightest star in the night sky, shining with a mysterious and charming light. His red high heels sparkled warmly under the light, and every time the heels touched the ground, it seemed to stir up ripples. The boy's face was covered by a ridiculous golden mask, but through the holes in the mask, his bright eyes could still be seen point. There was hesitation and fear in his eyes, but anyone who took a casual glance could still see the depth of his eyes hiding his joy and happiness. His movements were clumsy and ridiculous, like a stiff puppet point, but it doesn't matter anymore. Even if she is dancing with puppets, the queen's charm can still illuminate the entire dance floor. The two of them spun on the dance floor, their steps light and graceful, each turn full of strength and softness. The girl's black dress fluttered with his movements, like a shadow under the night sky point. The boy's movements were still stiff, and his ill-fitting black suit looked a little strange point, but such a strange dance still tells a perfect story. It is a silent dialogue point. It was like a golden whirlwind blowing through a dull tree, and the emotions and stories of each other were conveyed between the gentle fluttering of leaves. When the dance music was over, both sides returned to their previous positions, and this time the boy finally became smarter. The girl took the lead and bowed gracefully, the smile still on her face, and she stretched out her slender white right hand point. Straighten the golden mask on the other person's face. Even though it's not perfect, I'm really happy, and sometimes imperfection is acceptable in certain situations. Chapter 211, The Battle on the Berlin Air Defense Tower. 2 days later, air raid tower in the east side of Berlin. Karl stood on the top of the control tower, overlooking the city of Berlin below, and what came into view was a magnificent picture. The veins of the entire city shine with a unique brilliance under the morning sun. The wide boulevards are like the arteries of the city, crisscrossing and closely connecting every corner of the city, with vehicles flowing continuously on the roads. The bustling crowds of pedestrians are like blood flowing in the veins, providing prosperity and vitality to the city. The ancient buildings and modern skyscrapers along the street complement each other, giving people a feeling of time and space confusion. The Spree River winds through the city, and the river water ripples golden in the sun, making this a famous industrial city in Central Europe. It adds a bit of freshness and tranquility. With the Brandenburg Gate standing tall in the distance. Even in the early morning, you can vaguely see tourists coming and going and checking in and taking photos there. What a beautiful city, Karl exclaimed sincerely. At this moment, he was not wearing any makeup and was playing the role of Karl Hohenzollern, not Theodora Grindelwald. Cedric, who was also not wearing a golden mask, nodded in agreement when he heard this. It's really beautiful. I once read in a book that the introduction to this city said that Berlin can be called the entire Central European region, one of the oldest and most classical cities. It is truly beautiful, but unfortunately, this beauty seems to have a flaw. Did you see anything? Karl looked at Cedric in surprise. Cedric withdrew his gaze from the city below, looked at Karl, thought for a while, and pointed to an open space in the center of the city. Said seriously, "It is there, if I'm not mistaken, that there once stood a high wall, dividing the entire city in two. It also divides the country represented by this city into two different camps, although the wall has disappeared. But that empty space, like a scar formed when a wound has just healed, remains in the center of the city. It ruins all the beauty of this place." Very good answer. Karl looked at Cedric with satisfaction, even though the other party's pumpkin brain only had a single core processor. But fortunately, the single core performance of the processor is strong enough, so as long as he doesn't consider the problem of getting along with others, Cedric's learning speed is still very impressive. Whether it was the vast history of the Muggle world or the complex and difficult philosophy, he could quickly gain a preliminary grasp of it. One of the reasons why I'm still a little dull and stupid is that I have been studying for too short a time. On the other hand, Karl also discovered that the other party seemed to be a little dependent on him, and this behavior was unconscious. It could be due to trust, or it could be due to some other reasons, but it doesn't matter. Karl is confident that he will live long enough and have enough time to educate the other party slowly. Of course, the premise is that his heart is not exhausted. He thought so in his heart, but when his eyes looked at Cedric again, he couldn't help but smile and sigh, because he found that in his past life, he had never had such great patience with anyone. After thinking about this, he looked in the direction where Cedric had just pointed and spoke softly. In fact, history sometimes has such a symmetrical beauty. About half a century ago, this concrete monster under our feet, it's still a standard military fortress. The place where we are standing now is the turret of the twin 128mm anti-aircraft guns. The fire from this building illuminated the sky above the entire city of Berlin, announcing the destruction of the city and the empire behind it. It was the end of one war, but the beginning of another, and just 2 years ago, the wall standing on that empty lot was torn down by an angry crowd, and another war came to an end. 1 city, 2 wars. It's really amazing. I just don't know if the end of this war will herald the beginning of a new war, like a bard. Cole was asking the sky with deep emotion in the suburbs of this city. Cedric scratched his head in confusion, thought for a long time, and finally spoke honestly. I don't quite understand what you mean, but I think war is always bad. No, I'm not very satisfied with this answer. Karl looked back at Cedric and said seriously, while shaking his head, war brings death and destruction, but it can also solve problems in an instant that would normally take 10 or even a century to solve. After all, it was just a general outbreak of social contradictions. Some people called the person who started the war a demon. No one ever thought that he was voted into office by the angry people in this city. Ideals can never end wars, and hungry and angry people are always fertile ground for dictators. After saying these words, Carol waved at Cedric and pointed to the stairs. Okay, Karl's history class ends here. Cedric, you can go change your clothes after class. Remember, not to wear the mask crookedly again. You looked really funny that day. Let's go quickly. I have to change my clothes too. Got it? Cedric nodded in agreement obediently, but when he was about to leave, he looked back at Carol unfamiliarly, point with doubt and a hint of desire in his eyes. Carol looked at the other person and reached out to grab him, point, then he unbuttoned his collar with one hand, looked at the other person strangely, and deliberately changed to a girl's voice and asked in a gentle tone, "Handsome Mr. Diggory, do you have any questions that you haven't answered, or is there something that has caught your attention? What do you want to see? Do you want me to help you change my clothes?" Cedric was confused at first, and then he saw Karl's open collar, revealing his snow-white skin and well-trained chest muscles. He quickly waved his hands and denied loudly, "No, no, no, no. I just want you to tell me what role I need to play today, and what the topic of your speech is. After all, you said I was your personal assistant, so I should have some idea of what you were going to do next. How could I be so disgusting? Besides, what's so interesting about your upper body? It's not like I haven't seen it before." "What did you say?" Karl grabbed Cedric's ear angrily, saying that his good brother did not respect his body shape. Seemingly very angry, he grabbed the other person's ear and yelled loudly with his mouth close to his. "All you have to do next is to maintain a serious image, to alleviate the image of you as a starving ghost who only cares about eating in the minds of those wizards at the banquet that day. As for the content of the speech, didn't you understand it? This city has witnessed the end of 2 wars, and I'm going to bring him a 3rd war. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 212. You are a good person. What? Cedric looked at Cole with confusion on his face. Karl just smiled. "Why, are you starting to suspect me of doing something bad again?" "No." Cedric quickly waved his hands to deny it, looking at Cole with firm eyes and said seriously, "The problems I'm facing now are beyond my ability to judge, and I cannot make effective judgments whether what I'm doing now is right or wrong. It doesn't matter, because I believe in you. I believe you are a good person and you have genuine kindness in your heart." "What bullshit," Karl muttered in dissatisfaction. In his past life, no one had ever met him. He was evaluated as a good person as a teenager growing up in the neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. He still has a very good understanding of what he did in the past, such as when he was in state primary school. There were several tall, precocious Mexican teenagers who relied on their fathers to be in gangs. There are handsome white kids like Karl who have always been the bullies in school. Naturally, he is also the target of their bullying. Facing the huge physical gap, Karl's coping strategy is during the semester, you have to honestly pay $20 in protection fees every week. At the same time, I didn't go to lunch during the entire semester, endured the hunger in my stomach, and used the remaining money to buy parts on the black market. Finally, on the last night of the semester, he told the other party that he wanted to join their gang. He was willing to pay a one-time protection fee of $300, but only asked them to find him in an alley 2 blocks away from the school after class on that night. When those tall gangsters came to the place where no cameras could capture them, when they were in a completely hidden alley, they saw Cole with a cigarette in his mouth and a school bag on his back. The other party habitually wanted to bully him, but before he could get close, Karl directly opened his school bag and took out an assembled MP5 submachine gun from it. He emptied the magazine directly at them and shot through their knees with a few long bursts. And the guy in the lead, he kicked him to the ground, pointed the cold muzzle of the gun at his crotch, and fired all the remaining 10 bullets. The shot was accurate and fierce, completely shattering the opponent's testicles without injuring his femoral artery. After completing the surgery for the other party, he even thoughtfully left them a phone purchased on the black market. Let them call emergency services themselves. and from then on, across the Brooklyn neighborhood point in other people's mouths, I have always been described as vindictive and cruel, and it's a pity to hear the word good person from others. I don't know how much time has passed. When I think back on it, point Karl couldn't help but slowly walk to Cedric, raised his right hand, and placed it on the other's head. Point the guy seemed to enjoy it too. He closed his eyes and waited for the touch, but what greeted him was a loud slap. Point Karl slapped his silly pumpkin face aside and pointed to the stairs. Stop saying such disgusting things. It makes me uncomfortable. Let's go now. We have important things to do. Cedric, who was slapped in the face, glanced at Carol aggrievedly, lowered his head, and left. Point it looked like a golden retriever that successfully picked up a baseball thrown by its owner, but was slapped in the face for no apparent reason, with an expression of grievance all over its body. Point until Cedric's figure completely disappeared. Karl's tense face was like a cooked crab. Point it began to turn red visibly. He was breathing heavily and slapping his face desperately with his hands. After taking several deep breaths, he finally calmed down. Shit, why do I have this strange feeling? Karl stood back on the edge of the air defense tower. Below him was the newly awakened city of Berlin, and the morning breeze blew across his face, so gentle and cool. Point, but he could not calm down. His heart was beating wildly and his congested face became red and hot. Point he gazed at the city below him, knowing full well what kind of evil and turmoil were hidden beneath this prosperous and peaceful appearance. Point just like what he felt in his heart now. He needed to calm down, starting from choosing to enter the magical world. Point he has embarked on a path of no return, and what he needs in this process is calmness and ruthlessness. But now he became nervous because of a name given by someone, which was absolutely unacceptable. Congratulations host, your charm has finally yielded its first result, and you must be rewarded handsomely. The annoying voice rang in his mind, making the already irritable Carol even more irritable. Point he roared directly and bluntly, I'd rather take out my pistol and blow my own head off than listen to another word you say. You should know me better than others, and you should understand that I can really do it. Karl's threat directly silenced the dog system. After a full 5 minutes in his mind, Karl spoke first. Don't give me that boring reward. I don't need it at all. I just want to take what I deserve. Regarding the task I posted earlier, I think I should have been able to get some of the rewards I wanted. Of course there is no problem. The special mission, the Queen who rules the European magic world, has been completed by 15%. Your charm is indeed huge. You don't even need a speech. Just a dance can conquer 15% of the wizards present at the time. Rewards are now being distributed. One optional god level skill. Please choose it yourself. Do you still need to choose? Karl, who was in the memory palace in his mind, smiled disdainfully. Today is my official debut, so of course I need a skill that can prove that I'm the undisputed successor to Grindelwald. Give me god level control over the spell Fire Shield. The Fire Shield spell controlled by the god level has been issued, and at the same time, in order to reward the host to use his own charm, the first result has been obtained. This skill will now be automatically upgraded. The Fire Shield body protection you are controlling now will be slightly different. What's the difference? Karl asked with a dark face. That is of course a good thing. Fiend Fire is a very terrifying black magic. It is powerful but difficult to operate. Only Grindelwald can fully master this power, so in order to ensure that the host's performance is exciting enough, directly helped you improve your control to Grindelwald level. Now your Fiend Fire can follow your will. Selectively burning the target is very detailed and considerate. This way you can take good care of the feelings of your loved one. This group of Europeans who have never seen the world feel the terror of the new Dark Lord's coming. Cole returned to reality from the memory palace in his mind and blocked out the dog system's mean voice again. He pulled out an applewood wand, aimed it at himself and whispered, charming. A dazzling white light enveloped Karl's entire body, and when the light faded, a queen in a black robe appeared. Theodora Grindelwald makes another stunning appearance. Chapter 213. Fragrance and the Boy. In Chapter 2. I never thought that this magic would be used on me one day. Karl looked at the changes in himself, and sighed helplessly. When I invented this magic, my original intention was just to disgust Professor Snape. But now, it is actually used on himself. I don't know what Professor Snape is doing now. Did you have a good time with Harry during the summer vacation? Are you grateful to yourself? If I think about it carefully, I should be grateful. After all, it was me who arranged the fake identity for him and found a lawyer to scare Aunt Harry's family. This allowed Professor Snape to become Harry's guardian in the British Muggle Society. When Karl thought about the good things he had done, he couldn't help but feel moved by himself. I still remember that when I proposed this idea, Professor Snape looked at me with a look of extreme distrust and said, "Just tell me what you want from me, Mr. Hohenzollern." When I heard this, I became unhappy on the spot and retorted with a heartbroken tone, "Professor Snape, how could you have such a bad idea to hold your dear student hostage? I just want to make a simple deal with you." Reject. Professor Snape refused without waiting for him to finish his words. "I absolutely cannot help you do such a meaningless thing and help you produce such a simple semi-finished potion. That would be a disgrace to my reputation as a potion master. I will never make any compromise unless I die before you." Very good. Karl didn't have any intention of turning hostile at the time. Facing the cold rejection, he just recalled some past events. He spoke casually. "I remember that Miss Harry also has a godfather named Sirius Black, right? Since you don't agree to my deal, I can only start plan B. After all, doing this will increase my costs and I need some compensation. Then he can use his connections to get him released from Azkaban, and he should be able to legitimately become Harry's guardian with the Black family's wealth. If you give me some compensation, I think both parties will be happy." After saying this, Professor Snape, who had a look of "I would never obey" on his face a minute ago, only a silent back with head down was left behind. And the following story was as simple as usual. Professor Snape, whose bug was caught, once again crossed his bottom line and was forced to agree to Karl's deal. Thinking of this, Karl, who was standing on the rooftop smoking after completing his disguise, couldn't help but laugh. Hogwarts is still the best place. My classmates are so innocent and cute, and the professors have such a bottom line. It's unlike the world I'm facing now, which is so disgusting that it makes me want to vomit. Karl threw the half-burned Kappa and President cigarette in his hand down from a high place. Looking at the shining red dot, it slowly fell to the ground until it disappeared without a trace. Karl used his memories to calm himself down, checked his clothes, and strode towards the stairs. As soon as I pushed open the iron gate, I saw a huge pumpkin head. As soon as they met, the other party came over, sniffed a few times and complained, "You shouldn't smoke. It affects the way you smell." "Do I smell?" Theodora Grindelwald asked puzzledly. The big boy wearing a golden mask thought for a moment, then nodded seriously. "Of course, it's a strawberry and passion fruit scent." In the ammunition warehouse of the Air Defense Tower, Kevin Lestrange had a pair of heavy dark circles under his eyes. I walked past the dusty iron stairs and looked at the surrounding environment with bloodshot eyes. As a young master who grew up in the French Lestrange family, he had walked into countless buildings in his past life. But without exception, those buildings are decorated with gorgeous decorations, and there is a sense of vulgarity amidst the splendor. But today, all you can see in this building are dusty reinforced concrete walls, steel fences and stairs connected with rivets and welding rods. These things seem to have no sense of art at first glance, but upon closer inspection, they contain a unique sense of power. But the surroundings didn't matter to him now. He just wanted to see that face again. He had been completely sleepless for the past 2 days. And on that day in the banquet hall of the castle, he suffered the biggest setback in his life. So, when he returned home, he sat alone in the living room of the family castle, drinking by himself. He hadn't slept for 2 days and 2 nights. His father thought he would commit suicide because he couldn't bear the blow, but he couldn't understand what he was thinking. His idea was actually very simple. He must find a way to stay with that one, no matter what means. Kevin Lestrange came to his seat and stood there, taking a deep breath with his own immature thoughts. My mind was full of random thoughts, and I had already made up my mind to jump directly onto the stage after the next speech began. Have a hearty duel with the damn guy next to that one, but just as he withdrew his gaze from the open space below, looking up, there were countless eyes with dark circles under their eyes standing in the corridor, which was 3 stories high from the open space below. There were young men with haggard faces but determined expressions, some of whom were once his good brothers. Damn, there seemed to be too many opponents for the duel. Kevin Lestrange cursed inwardly, looking at his once good brother with eyes full of hostility and determination. And those people also stared at him with unfriendly eyes on the other side of the corridor. Their fathers looked at their sons with helpless eyes. These boys in the family, who usually can't even get up early, can now come here to attend meetings before dawn. Sometimes we have to admit that personal charisma is indeed a quality that a leader should possess. However, compared to those teenagers who are infatuated with love, these middle-aged people seem to find it difficult to tolerate the environment around them. They were arranged according to their levels, on 2 corridors above, and at the bottom 3 floors above them. There was a huge open space, and a high wattage searchlight was hung in the center above their heads, casting the light on the open space at the bottom. They stood in the corridor and looked down. They didn't look like noble MPs waiting for the leader's speech at all, but more like a group of prisoners waiting for the prison guard to speak. The surrounding environment does indeed look like a prison cell. The crowd couldn't help but whisper to each other until they heard the sound of an airtight door being opened. Accompanied by a masked boy, the noble queen had already stood under the spotlight without her noticing. Her blue eyes scanned the entire room, her red lips slightly parted, and she spoke in a contemptuous tone. "Welcome, everyone. I'm sure everyone is not satisfied with this environment, but I really want to say this, and there is no better place than here. After all, you and I are both in a cage." Chapter 214, for the greater good. What is this? What on earth does she want to say? When were we in the cage? We have magic and are the chosen ones. Let's go. This is just nonsense. There's no need to listen to it anymore. Doubt, dissatisfaction, anger, all kinds of emotions mixed in the language, following the light of the searchlight, pouring down like a waterfall. He wanted to completely crush the slender figure in the clearing, but she didn't seem to care at all. He raised his head and let the noisy sound of the white light shine on that extraordinary face. The blue eyes scanned the people present, full of disdain. I heard a lot of voices. Theodora Grindelwald deliberately paused for a while and then spoke slowly again. Some people feel regret, some people feel dissatisfied, and some people even feel angry. You think you have magic. He is a lucky person among humans who was chosen by the god of magic. He is the best among the entire human race, standing at the top. But look around you. You'll see dark reinforced concrete walls and steel covered in dust and rust. This is where we should be, isn't it? One of you dares to be in the Sunday do. You dare to show the magic that makes you proud in front of muggles. The questioning voice was not angry, nor was it loud, but it continued to echo in the warehouse. The voice that was mixed with various emotions before disappeared without a trace in the face of this question. Whether it is the young men who are preparing to duel with others, or the octogenarians whose bodies are half buried in the ground, or those middle-aged people who now hold power and high positions in the wizarding world. Without exception, they all lowered their heads. They had no words to refute or say, because this was the reality. "Ah, you all silent?" Theodora Grindelwald raised her head and used that peerless face. Looking at the people who lowered their heads, he kept shaking his head and spoke in an even more disdainful tone. "I really hope that after the topic just raised, someone will dare to stand in front of me, have a hearty debate with me, even if it's based on the so-called mainstream viewpoint currently advocated by the Ministry of Magic. I am willing to accept criticism, attacks and even insults if you want to refute me, but what I get is deathly silence. I never thought that the organization founded by my grandfather would be composed of a bunch of silent cowards." She pronounced the word coward very heavily and let out a sudden roar like a thunderclap. It exploded in this closed fortress, forcing even the most silent lambs to look up at the sky in horror. The emotions of anger and unwillingness continued to spread like the moisture in the air before a storm. Theodora Grindelwald, standing in the center of the stage, smiled contentedly. She knew very well that facing the huge organization of saints left by Grindelwald would be difficult. Like in the British wizarding world. It is totally impossible to use economic means to infiltrate slowly and silently. The organization was too large and the personnel were too complicated, so she could only rely on another thing to keep them under her control. Emotions of anger and unwilling hatred are undoubtedly the best driving forces for uniting an organization. As for external means, there is only one, which is war. After arousing the anger of the crowd, she did not continue her speech, but stood there silently. But she didn't have to wait long as she entered with her new audience. Following a few pops of air, a dozen auras in uniforms and holding wands suddenly appeared around the venue like gods descending from the sky. Auras from the International Confederation of Wizards. Why are they here? Soon someone recognized the identities of these people and immediately exclaimed loudly, "There is a traitor in the organization. Someone betrayed us. It's over. To show my loyalty, I left my wand at home when I went out today. What should I do now?" The exclamations soon turned into a commotion. The corridors on both floors were filled with a noisy crowd, some of them young men full of vigor and vitality. Seeing an opportunity to excel and show off, he simply pulled out his wand and engaged in a tense standoff with the auras. The situation became tense for a moment until a burst of crisp applause attracted the attention of everyone present, including the auras. All were attracted to the stage below. Theodora Grindelwald waved her hands and clapped gently. Her white and slender arms waved gently like a beautiful butterfly. But the words that came out of her red lips were like a storm. "There are no traitors, gentlemen and ladies. These gentlemen are here at my invitation. This is where I will hold the meeting." It was disclosed to the German Ministry of Magic in advance. What? Someone from the Grindelwald family actually betrayed the wizards? How is this possible? How is this possible? No, she must not be Miss Theodora. She must be someone from the Ministry of Magic pretending to be her. The whole audience erupted in noise for the third time. The saints, whose emotions were just aroused, suddenly felt their mood plummet from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the valley. Emotions of anger, unwillingness to believe, and unwillingness are constantly released. Until that familiar voice came from below again. "There is no need to doubt or be puzzled. I'm willing to take direct responsibility for every word I have said. The audience for this show is carefully selected by me. Whether or not you are willing to declare your loyalty to me now, whether you are my enemy or not in the future, I will still invite you to come, because I'm going to declare a great war. This is for the freedom of the entire wizarding community, for the future of our children, and for the entire wizarding world. For the greater good." Theodora Grindelwald spoke slowly, like a classical piano piece, with every key being pressed. That voice went straight into everyone's heart. It was so gentle. But in everyone's ears, it was no less than bursts of thunder. Once again, everyone's eyes were focused on the slender figure wrapped in the searchlight. This time there was no questioning, no anger, no contempt. There is only fear and deep expectation. For the greater good. At this moment, a loud shout suddenly came from the crowd, and this shout was like a leaking oil barrel. A match was thrown in, and a raging flame began to burn. People waved their right hands vigorously, and the young men holding wands raised their wands high, and shouted in unison, "For the greater good." The sound grew louder and louder, filling this permanent military fortress with its thick concrete walls and corridors riveted with steel. They all began to tremble slightly, and the auras who were teleported looked at each other, fear written in their eyes. They should have stopped all this from happening, but now they are like puppets, standing there stupidly. Until someone raised his wand and aimed it at the frenzied crowd. But nothing was said. A wave of heat blew directly onto his face, and the strong blue light made him unable to help but cover his face with his hands. When he looked up again, his right hand holding the wand had begun to tremble. Leaf Flame. She released Leaf Flame. Chapter 215. The Return of the Remnants of the Old Era. The dark blue flames silently enveloped the entire warehouse like a spider web. Dozens of auras were divided into a dozen small spaces by the flames. With the reflection of the dark blue flames reflected in their pupils, his face was covered in cold sweat and was filled with panic and fear. This is Fiend Fi, the most famous dark magic in the wizarding world. Besides the 3 unforgivable curses, it was extremely difficult to control its violence. And there was almost no way to extinguish it until it completely burned everything around it. Now surrounded by this terrifying flame, even the auras who have been dealing with dark wizards for years couldn't help but feel a little scared. Don't worry, gentlemen, you are my invited guests until the end of this speech. No harm will come to you, I promise you. On the honor of the Grindelwald family. A soft voice came from below again, and Theodora Grindelwald gave a playful look. Looking at the terrified auras, perhaps to show that they were safe, she reached one of her hands into the blazing blue flames. Do not. A desperate scream poured down from the corridor of the building. Kevin Lestrange, with bloodshot pupils, looking down at Theodora Grindelwald in horror. That scream seemed to come from the depths of his soul. But he was greeted with a bright smile. The slender figure was not destroyed by the dark blue flames. The slender white arms swayed gently in the flames. It was as if it was not a fierce fire that could burn everything, but the warm blue water of the Maldives. A second silence fell upon the entire audience. All the saints looked at Theodora Grindelwald, who was waving her arms in the flames, with surprise and excitement. However, the expressions of despair on the aura's faces became more and more intense. If the other party suddenly released the fierce fire before, it could still be considered a special emergency situation. Theodora Grindelwald, who was now waving her arms in the flames, was undoubtedly using this silent action. Declaring himself the unquestionable successor of Grindelwald. Because only the man who once frightened the entire European magical world could control the terrifying and violent blue flame. Okay, since everyone has no objection, please remain silent and listen to what I'm going to say next. Then, I will not let you down. In order to save your time, I will directly announce the ultimate purpose of this speech. I will carry on my grandfather's wish and continue to fight for complete freedom for wizards. Theodora Grindelwald withdrew her arm from the flames and, like all great orators, began to pace around the stage with her arms outstretched. But in this process, I need the support of people who share the same ideals as me, and I need the help of my comrades. Having said this, he suddenly turned around and looked up at the audience above his head and spoke seriously. So, please give me an answer now. Are you willing to support me and give me help for the greater good? I'm willing to offer you my sincere loyalty. The Rosier family will all be loyal to Grindelwald. The Lestrange family will always be loyal to Grindelwald. The wait did not last long. Countless elderly people, countless middle-aged people in their prime, and young people who had been eager to try came one after another. They raised their wands and shouted their loyalty to the person in the audience. I don't need to be loyal. But what no one expected was that during this emotional and heated session, a gentle rejection was like a bucket of cold water mixed with ice, which directly chilled these excited wizards to the core. The feeling of doubt began to spread again, and everyone couldn't help but whisper to each other. And Theodora Grindelwald on the stage at the bottom suddenly took out her wand. When everyone was puzzled, he slowly knelt on one knee, raised his wand high and spoke seriously. I don't need your allegiance. The purpose of this speech has never been to gain your personal allegiance. I just want you to understand clearly what I want to fight for my whole life, and I'm here at this moment. I solemnly swear before your witnesses to be bound by the name of Theodora Grindelwald. I pledge my allegiance to you, to this organization, to the greater good. I will devote the rest of my life to this great ideal until I die. The dark blue flames burned fiercely, reflecting the faces of everyone present. Filled with surprise, confusion, and excitement. The past century in the wizarding world. Countless wizarding organizations have also emerged, and without exception, the leaders of those organizations demand absolute personal loyalty from their subordinates. Never, not even once, has a future leader of an organization appeared in front of so many members of the organization. I swore allegiance to them in reverse, and the complex emotions gathered together, just like the magma under the ground, being constantly compressed. Finally it erupted like an explosion. Theodora. Grindelwald. Theodora. Grindelwald. Theodora. Grindelwald. 1. Call. To calls. Countless calls sounded one after another, and they no longer shouted the slogan of the Saints organization. Instead, they are calling out a name that they believe can bring changes to their future. The surging shouts were like a tsunami, constantly hitting the ancient building. At the bottom of the building, Theodora Grindelwald accepted it all with a calm expression. Then he suddenly raised his right hand. And there was a tsunami of cheers at the moment when that white and slender arm was raised. It came to an abrupt halt, as if the pause button had been pressed. I now officially declare the German Ministry of Magic, as well as all bureaucrats of the European Confederation of Wizards, we are demanding to obtain legal organizational status and immediately hold new elections. This is not a discussion, but a notice. I will give you 1 year to consider. 1 year from now, I hope to get a satisfactory answer. In this year, you can smear and slander us as much as you want, but the only thing you can't suppress is us. This is the sound we made. Please remember everything that happened today. We are officially back. Theodora. Grindelwald announced calmly, and after the announcement, her serious face became relaxed again. With a sly look in his eyes, he looked at the other saints and the audience and said half-jokingly, "Okay, now that the show is over, you can leave first and move on to the next performance. I only perform for specially invited audiences." Chapter 216 Silent Choice. The fanatical crowd began to leave, and the sound of air explosions continued to be heard. Most of the middle-aged and elderly wizards directly used apparition magic to leave. But as they walked away, they looked at the auras trapped in the flames with either hostility or complacency. The young people were much more excessive, and they all spoke trash to the auras in a sarcastic tone. French, English, German, and even some Latin mixed in, with everyone speaking the same language. It feels like a World Swear Word Awards ceremony. You bunch of power lackeys, do you still want to come and search my castle? Isn't it a weekly routine inspection? Where is your previous swagger? In front of Grindelwald's heir, you are still the same as you were half a century ago. You are trapped by this supreme power. Why not offer your loyalty now? Maybe you can walk out intact. Kevin Lestrange was the last to leave, and he seemed to run into someone he knew. Facing an aura who was about the same age as his father, he uttered crazy words, and even at the end he reached his hand into the blue flame burning in front of the other person. Through the wall of fire, he stared into the eyes of the aura inside, and spoke in a rather crazy tone. "The noble Lestrange will never approve of people like you. You will eventually be defeated by this supreme ideal. Burn to ashes completely." He was indeed a little crazy today, but it was not his fault. He did this countless times in the middle of the night, when his family was sleeping soundly. These guys would inexplicably break into their own castles and forcibly demand a search in the name of routine security checks. Then they found various reasons to force their father to bribe them. At this time, the young Kevin Lestrange would hide in the corner of the second floor corridor. Countless days and nights passed as he looked at the men in aura uniforms in the living room downstairs with a strange look. Those images were so deeply ingrained in his mind that he would meet other classmates from pure blood families at school. Together they formed a student organization modeled after the Saints, but now it seems that a poor imitation will never be as good as the original. That adult heir has appeared, and like his grandfather, he will eventually write his own name in the history of the wizarding world, whether it is good or bad. Kevin Lestrange, a shout pulled the young man back to reality from his memories. He looked down and saw a beautiful face with a faint smile. "Do you know my name?" the boy asked with a trembling voice. "Of course. I still have a very vivid memory of the boy who dared to ask me to dance." Theodora Grindelwald tapped her temple with her finger and continued with a smile. "But I think you'd better leave now. Your presence is not needed for the next performance." "Of course, my dear lady." Kevin Lestrange excitedly saluted as a knight, but when he was about to leave, he fixed his eyes on Cedric, who had been standing next to Karl and wearing a mask, and said in a resolute tone, "I always look forward to meeting you next time, the most beautiful lady in my heart, and I will prove it to you with my actions. I am the one who can ask you to dance, by the name of Lestrange." After the boy finished speaking, he used magic to leave the building, disguised as Karl, who was Theodora Grindelwald. Hearing this, his body trembled slightly, but it was not because he was moved by the second-year student's speech. It was just that it was really difficult to hold back his laughter, because the moment he finished saying this, he laughed through the 2 holes on the mask of the person standing next to him. I can already smell the burnt pumpkin pie caused by anger, but no matter how much fun it was, he still had to do his work, so he quickly calmed down. She turned back into the queen who conquered the entire Saints organization with just one speech. And her cold blue eyes raised slightly. Looking at the auras trapped by Fiendfy high in the sky surrounding the building. "Your cowardice is beyond my expectation. After such a long time, none of you dared to touch the flame in front of you. Sure enough, in your eyes, the so-called honor of the Ministry of Magic and the so-called duties of auras are nothing but empty words after all. You chose your beliefs at the moment when you had the best chance of stopping me. I will not kill you." Theodora Grindelwald shook her head in disdain. The auras trapped in the flames looked at each other in amazement. Looking at the puzzled expressions on those faces, Theodora Grindelwald spoke again. This time her tone was filled with resentment for not fighting back. "It seems that you haven't realized what an opportunity you just missed. Before I speak, the flames in front of you will burn you to ashes in an instant if you reach out and touch them. But this is your only chance. If you die here, then those people behind the scenes will be in trouble. We can use your death as a basis for widespread media coverage, completely erasing the half-century gap. The Saints organization that has reappeared in the European wizarding world is characterized as a group of dark wizards who like to use violence. This would buy you precious time for your failure, but after weighing the pros and cons, you chose not to do so." Theodora Grindelwald deliberately paused for a moment, looking at the various strange and awkward expressions that appeared on those faces. A few older auras opened their mouths to speak, but were interrupted by her. "Please be quiet, gentlemen. I don't need you to tell me the answer, because it's a lie. I am willing to tell you the truth, whether you are willing to accept it or not, for only one reason. That is, after weighing the pros and cons in your minds, you think of the Ministry of Magic behind you, and the existing order it represents. It's not worth your lives, that's all. Even though you didn't join us right then and there, but on this matter, it is undisputed that we stand together, and you can continue to maintain your current identity. There is still 1 year left. When each night falls, you can slowly think about it. The Saints Palace is waiting for the answers of all wizards." After saying this, Theodora Grindelwald took out her wand again and released the auras. Then he waved his hand dismissively. "If you want to take action, I welcome you at any time. I always hope to have a tough opponent who can stand against me. Victory without an opponent is really boring, but I remind you that it's best to leave quickly, otherwise this bunker will become your flaming coffin. After all, the return of every organization must ultimately be accompanied by a strong declaration of purpose. I will set the bunker on fire. As for whether the muggles will find out, I guess that's your job." Chapter 217 Resentment and the Last Goal. "Can't you please stop walking around and just sit down and wait for a while?" In the VIP lounge of Berlin International Airport, Karl looked at Cedric walking around in front of him and said impatiently. There were only 2 of them in the spacious and bright waiting room at the moment, which was actually not normal. Even the VIP lounge in a city like Berlin is crowded on weekdays, but now, whether it is the box or the waiting hall outside, it is completely empty. As for the reason, the news playing on the TV hanging on the wall of the box might be the reason. The Berlin municipal government has determined that the burning of an abandoned air defense tower in the eastern suburbs was not a terrorist attack. The cause was an accident involving undiscovered thermite in the military warehouse of the air defense tower. The Berlin city government has announced through the city council that the state of emergency has been lifted and citizens are invited to return to normal social life. Is there really no problem? Cedric, who was scolded by Karl, sat on the sofa opposite anxiously. I looked out the huge floor-to-ceiling window with lingering fear and saw a busy street in the distance with sirens blaring, using fiery fire to burn down the entire anti-aircraft tower bunker. Is a bit too crazy. The blue sparks that shot up into the sky did not go out until half an hour ago, and this news report is not reliable. Don't these people reporting this news have any professional common sense? Even if thermite explodes, it is impossible for it to ignite the entire air defense tower in an instant. There is no large amount of fuel such as gasoline stored in it. Even if there are those things, without sufficient oxygen supply, the flames should be dark red or orange. How could it be blue? Cedric analyzed it seriously with some concern. Carl, who was sitting opposite, clapped softly and said approvingly, "It seems that you have not been lazy during this period and have learned professional knowledge well. These are probably the people from the German Ministry of Magic. A large-scale confusion spell was cast to tamper with the memories of some of the people on the scene. This is also one of the commonly used methods. So far, it seems to be working well. That's not worthy of praise, Karl," Cedric said with a hint of resentment. "You don't consider the consequences too much. Exposing the existence of the wizarding world is an unforgivable crime in the entire wizarding world. You really went a little too far this time, and according to the script you gave me before, why was my speech cancelled? And why were you so impulsive?" Hearing this, Karl touched his nose awkwardly and looked at Cedric, whose face showed an unhappy expression. After coughing twice to cover up his embarrassment, he spread his hands and said helplessly, "I was a little bit overwhelmed. In that kind of environment, the performance process is often beyond the control of the performer. The words have already been spoken. We have to make a big news. As for the script, it is just a specification. Aren't rules meant to be broken? Yes, yes, yes." Cedric clasped his hands together in a sarcastic tone, glanced at Cole with the side of his eyes, and said in a low voice, "That's not good. Mr. Hohenzollern has never been a person restricted by rules. Even my own scripts can be so casual. Where are the lines about never falling in love or having children? Of course, I still have a very vivid memory of the boy who dared to ask me to dance. I've never seen this line in a script." Karl sniffed his nose and smelled a sour odor. He looked helplessly at Cedric, who turned his head away because of anger. After thinking about it, the best solution is to ignore the other person for the time being to prevent this uncontrollable emotion from continuing to spread. But when I tried to calm down several times, those sour words kept replaying in my mind. Karl couldn't stand this passive role of accepting emotions, so he took it out from his ring. I took out a simple Macupe box and briefly recalled it in the memory palace. Aunt Rosia puts Macupe on herself, and then she applies Macupe on half of her face with skillful techniques. Finally, she quietly walked behind Cedric and used magic to change her voice into that of Theodora Grindelwald. Whispered in Cedric's ear, "Handsome Mr. Diggory seems very dissatisfied with my performance. Do you have any comments?" Feeling the heat coming from my earlobe, the lively pumpkin turned red and ripe visibly. Cedric stepped back nervously, looking at that half-gorgeous face in horror. The face was full of anger, and the white and slender arms suddenly grabbed the black tie around his neck. Pulling his face closer, she looked into his terrified eyes through her blue eyes, painted with red eyeshadow. "You're not criticizing me for not following the script. I just thought that it would be better to swear off love for the rest of my life. Why not leave an opportunity for you outstanding young men to compete? You don't seem to like it, Mr. Diggory. Is there such an opportunity, or do you not want to compete at all?" With the blessing of his god-level performance, Karl, with only half of his face exposed, portrayed the expression of anger mixed with a hint of resentment to the fullest. The bewitching intent in the words was immediately evident. This sentence and that face directly froze Pumpkin's brain. Cedric was so nervous that his face was covered in sweat, but he didn't even notice the wicked smile on the other half of the face. In the end, the nervous dog was scratched by the arrogant cat again. A loud slap landed on the back of Cedric's head, and Karl slapped Cedric head first onto the sofa. Then she returned to her previous seat, removed the Macupe on half of her face, and spoke seriously. "How about this compensation, dear Mr. Diggory? I think you should be satisfied with Miss Theodora's personal explanation. Put away those inappropriate thoughts in your mind now. We are about to leave this city. Going home. Cedric climbed up from the sofa again, scratching his head in embarrassment. Go home? What home? Don't forget your companionship service. But I paid for it, and the term is 1 month. There are still 5 days until the end of July. From the looks of it, you don't intend to provide adequate service. Karl, who had returned to his original identity, simply tidied his clothes and then pulled up Cedric, who was still lying on the sofa. After the pumpkin head adjusted his clothes, he gently patted the other person's red cheek with his right hand and said jokingly, "Well, there's no need to be angry anymore. My business matters have been resolved, and the plan requested by my partners has been completed. Of course, our journey only has one last goal left, which is to fulfill your inner thoughts and create a world that is at least fair and beautiful. Go do something. This is what we agreed on before we set out. I always keep my word, but you'd better not take the money and not do the job. 1 month's companionship service, even 1 day less will not do." Chapter 218 Black Sea Shipyard. Isn't this still a business? Cedric sighed helplessly and blew away the steam coming out of the tea in front of him. In the distance, the setting sun is slowly disappearing over the Black Sea. As night falls, the summer heat gradually subsides. The gentle breeze brought the coolness of the seashore into this dead forest. Countless gantries and steel structure equipment let out mournful cries under the blowing of the sea breeze. Various red stains of rust spread wantonly on the surface, including 2 giant warships that had not yet been completed and were parked in the 2 largest docks on one of the ski jump deck battleships. There is an exquisite small wooden table in the bridge command tower. On the small wooden table, the unique Russian samovar was emitting steam. The elegant and exquisite copper body is decorated with large flower patterns that Russians like. This pattern style was once quite popular in the northeastern cities of a certain large eastern country. Karl drank hot tea with lemon and milk while listening to Cedric's constant complaints. Don't deny it. There's no flight schedule, and the special car and fake passport were already prepared. There is also a list of people to contact that has been prepared. I certainly believe that you also have this kind of thing to do all this, but that's not cost effective for you. You'll take the method with the lowest cost. So follow these clues. We came to this place this time, not just for what you said, but for the ideals in my heart. It seems that you have become a lot smarter. Listening to the other party's complaining analysis, Karl admitted it without hesitation. You guessed it right. This is indeed a business, and the business partner is the Republican Party in the United States. They arranged all this for us, and their purpose is very simple, which is to get the huge ship in the dock next to us disappear from the earth forever. The Republican Party wants to do business with you? Cedric asked in disbelief. You attended the Democratic candidate's campaign banquet a few days ago. How could they turn around and do business with Republicans? What's so strange about this? Karl pointed at the rusty aircraft carrier control tower in front of him while drinking hot tea. Look at where we are now. This is the Black Sea Shipyard, the brightest jewel in the Soviet Iron Fist. Moscow, Kyiv, Minsk, Gorshkov, Admiral Kuznetsov. These once shining star warships in the Red Navy were all built in this shipyard. Don't be fooled by the fact that it is rusty and dead now. It used to be one of the most heavily fortified military factories in the world. So, you understand. What do I understand? Cedric continued to look at Cole with confusion. At the same time, he secretly stretched out his left hand, wanting to add 2 more spoonfuls of sugar to his black tea. Unfortunately, as soon as his left hand touched the sugar jar, it was ruthlessly hit. Karl took a silver spoon and knocked it hard on the back of the other person's hand, after driving away the mouse that stole the candy. Looking at Cedric, who kept blowing on the back of his left hand, he said helplessly, the principle you should understand is simple. For any business, you must find a professional and reliable partner. In the field of international arms, the Republicans have always been a good partner, even though they are greedy and shameless. But it is also professional enough. After all, it represents the interests of the huge military-industrial complex. I thought they represented the interests of traditional American conservatives. Cedric pretended to be enlightened. At the same time he continued to ask, if what you said is true, the Republican Party in the United States is selling guns, then what is the Democratic Party? They should represent the progressive forces of modernism. They are selling medicine. Karl held the teacup and blew gently over the tea with his mouth, saying without raising his eyelids, modernism, environmentalism, these are just words to cover up contradictions, especially environmentalism. It is indeed a very profitable business. As for the rest, you have only been exposed to the Muggle world for a year now. If you get to know us for a while, you'll understand. We openly sell medicines in Europe and the United States, so of course we have to support the Democratic Party during the election. It's the same thing as before. When doing business, you have to choose a professional and reliable partner. Cedric was already at a loss. In fact, after spending some time with Karl, he could already vaguely guess some of the truth. But deep down, I can never face all this as calmly and indifferently as Karl. That's why he kept asking Karl questions that he already knew the answers to. Because he always felt that the moment these cruel answers came out of Karl's mouth, he was always able to accept it a little better. What about my ideal? Cedric finally asked, after hesitating for a long time. What is your ideal? Karl put down his teacup and asked deliberately. As a result, this question made Cedric a little angry. The angry little golden retriever stood up, holding the corner of the table, with the words "I'm angry" written all over his face. But Karl deliberately stretched out a hand and touched the huge head, with a wicked smile on his face, and comforted in a gentle tone, "Don't be angry. Of course I haven't forgotten the promise I made to you before. I just want to help you plan and standardize your ideals. What you think in your heart right now cannot be called an ideal. It is just because of your kindness. After you have seen the most despicable cruelty in the world, there is a huge emotional trauma and an overflow of compassion. It's a simple idea that comes to mind, but it's not detailed, standardized, or operationalized, with a set of professional words and a pat on the head." The little golden retriever, who had been extremely angry just now, instantly sat back in his seat quietly. There was no way of realizing that every time Karl showed this expression, he was trying to trick others. Seeing that Cedric had fallen into the trap, Karl immediately continued, "So we fine-tune it a little bit, and your original idea is to make the world look less ugly than it is now. You also saw the newspapers I left for them on that piece of land in Gaza. You were very excited when you told me that there is hope for the future. Those surging protests are a sign that humanity is once again young. But have you ever thought about this? What is the deepest reason behind all these appearances? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 219 Official. Hearing this, Cedric fell silent again, just like when he saw the newspaper half a year ago. His initial feeling at that time was that there was no doubt that as time passed, people's moral standards gradually improved. But now he didn't need to think too much. He already knew very well that this answer must be wrong. So after a long silence, he slowly spoke. "Although I really don't want to say this, I briefly recalled the contents of those newspapers. Based on the marginal information in some reports, I came to the conclusion that it is because of the development of technology that everyone has a mobile phone. We can act as media reporters, conduct a large number of online reports, and destroy the information cocoon formed by traditional media. Letting more bystanders see the truth has aroused the kindness and belief in resistance in their hearts. This is my analysis. It's wonderful. It's really wonderful." Karl clapped his hands happily, his face showing approval. He even opened the sugar jar that he had just guarded so carefully. He added 2 large spoonfuls of white sugar to the other person's black tea. "Your analytical perspective is unique, accurate and profound," Karl said approvingly as he stirred Cedric's tea. "But the starting point is still to firmly believe in the kindness in human nature. You are a perfect and good man, Mr. Diggory. I agree with this very much, but what I want to say is that this is definitely not the most profound underlying reason. The most profound underlying reason comes from the fonts printed in those newspapers. Chinese? Cedric asked with some confusion, looking at the black tea in front of him. Can a carrier of words possess such powerful power? Of course it's impossible for a single word to have such powerful power. Karl denied calmly, but then he changed the subject and spoke firmly. But the country represented by these words has such a powerful force. You should read more about that ancient country and its many historical works. From those crystallizations of wisdom, you can understand a lot about the logic of how human society works. I'll tell you the answer directly. The reason why people began to condemn, criticize, and oppose the atrocities brought about by the former order in the future, predicted by that newspaper, is that it's just that because of this newly rising country, she has firmly stood on the side of morality. There is no need to deny it, or make malicious speculations. No matter how time passes, the underlying code that shapes this world will always be power. It's just that the direction of power this time is different from before. There is no need to think about those abstruse philosophies and ideologies. The earth is big enough to support 2 superpowers, but sometimes there will eventually be some nations with different ideas. When history reaches a new fork in the road, this time there was a group of people holding torches and lighting up another path. That's all. Karl's calm voice echoed in this small steel room. Cedric looked at him in silence for a long time, then asked again, so the purpose of our coming here is related to this problem? Of course, Carol said firmly. The big ship we are sitting on now, her sister has just been taken away by the Russian Federation armed forces. Her fate should have been the same as that of the Ulyanov in the dock next door, becoming a pile of scrap metal. But we can help her find a new rebirth point and let her be in the hands of her designer students. Regaining a new life can also help you realize that vague ideal in your mind. How about it? Are you very touched, TSK? Cedric snorted in dissatisfaction, looked at Cole with a smirk, and spoke without hesitation. You must have made a lot of money from this. You helped the Republicans to do this dirty work that should not be seen in public. The price must be high. Selling this ship to the Eastern Power will not only bring a good reward, but also bring good luck. When have you ever made a loss in business? And you still say you are doing this for my ideals? Everything is just for your business. After saying that, Cedric picked up the teacup and looked at Cole with an I see it all look. That feeling of being 3 parts proud and a little bit contemptuous made Carl's eyes twitch wildly, and he could only drink tea to hide his embarrassment. At the same time, he began to complain in his heart, wondering why the general he was going to trade with hadn't arrived yet. Just when he felt that his lungs were about to float up from the tea, Cedric, who was sitting opposite him, suddenly looked at him and spoke firmly. Actually, you don't need to teach me so carefully. I admit that I'm indeed very stupid in some aspects. Whether it is the future wizarding world or the future muggle world, it will definitely be very different because of your existence. Even if you are the best teacher in the world, I don't think I can learn your way of thinking in such a short time. I do get emotional sometimes, and I tend to fall into simple analysis of right and wrong when facing complex situations in the future. I'm almost certain that I can't make the proper self-judgment, but at this moment, I still decided to tell you. In the years to come, no matter what you do, no matter what situation you are in, I will trust you unconditionally. This is not just a simple conversation between friends. It is a promise and a real. At the end of the conversation, Cedric, who was in high spirits, couldn't think of a suitable word after trying for a long time to describe what he was going to say next, and just as he was trying to think, there was a sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. It was like a loud bell suddenly rang in a quiet room. The 2 people who were sitting face to face turned their heads at the same time to look in the direction of the voice, only to see General Vasily, with whom I happened to have done business before. He was looking at the 2 of them with an extremely embarrassed look. The sudden sound just now was because his pipe fell to the ground. Excuse me, gentlemen. It seems I should have knocked, General, Vasily said awkwardly. It's alright, General. We've been waiting for a long time. Please take a seat. I think this transaction will be a good one for you. So, for a shipyard, it's probably been a long wait. Karl coughed twice to hide his embarrassment, then used magic to conjure up a stool, and pointed at the empty seat. While speaking enthusiastically, General Vasily sat down awkwardly, and Carol immediately poured him tea. As soon as he sat down, Cedric was also busy, pouring milk and helping to pick up lemon slices with smooth movements. It was as if the two young men who had just looked into each other's eyes and had a passionate conversation had never appeared. Chapter 220 Special Price. Don't you have anything to say? The tea in the teapot on the table has run out, and the three people sitting around the small table have been staring at each other for 5 minutes. Carol couldn't help but break the silence and said, "There's no need to be so formal, General Vasily. This is your home ground after all, and we are here to do business. So, according to the procedure, you should quote a price first, General." Vasily put the pipe back in his mouth a little awkwardly, even though the tobacco in it had long been extinguished. He still pretended to take 2 puffs, but when he was about to exhale the smoke, he seemed more embarrassed. Snapped. Carol snapped his fingers loudly, and General Vasily's extinguished pipe reignited without flame. "It doesn't matter. Although time is tight, I'm willing to wait." Carol looked at General Vasily, who was staring at his pipe, and said with a smile, "This time you were 20 minutes late, and you weren't in the same rush and urgency as you were last time at the Crimean Peninsula Theater. It seems that you should have received a good offer before we officially made the deal. If I'm not mistaken, it should be a Swedish steel company. They quoted you $380 per ton for scrap iron. It's more than twice the international market price, and there's also a deposit for 4 large ships. I guessed it right." Cough. Cough. General Vasily, who had just taken another puff of his pipe, was so frightened by Carol's words that he choked on the smoke. After coughing violently, he looked at the other person with a bit of disbelief and asked, "How did you know? Could it be that all this was arranged by you?" "Of course not." Karl maintained a professional fake smile. "How could we have such great power? This is clearly a premeditated plan. As for the planner, it was your old rival, the CIA. It has nothing to do with us, or we are just one of their plans, the promoters of another plan B." "What the hell do you want, you damn Yankees?" General Vasily said indignantly, smoke coming out of his nostrils. "It's not what we want." Karl waved his hand quickly. "Although it's the same plan, we are us, and they are them. Even within the same party, there are more or less several factions, not to mention that this is a gluttonous feast. All Gals will only act for their own growth. There is absolutely no possibility of cooperation. If there is a common goal, it is this shipyard, where you are now. She must die quietly, like a battleship sinking into the sea. He is not allowed to appear above the horizon." "What difference does it make?" General Vasily shook his head in pain. Just as the young man in front of him said, he had already thought about how to reject their offer before he came. Because according to the contract he had received before, he could completely sacrifice the Ulyanov point with the orders for the construction of those 4 large ships. The basic operation of the shipyard can be maintained, and there is even hope to complete the construction of the Variag aircraft carrier, which has been 70% built. But now the word coming out of the other party's mouth ruthlessly shattered this fantasy. That's right, it was a fantasy. When he enthusiastically showed the order to the chief aircraft carrier designer of the shipyard yesterday. The other party just looked helplessly at the sunset outside the window and said calmly, "It is impossible to complete this warship with our own strength now. We need more than 200 universities and more than 1,000 research institutions. There are thousands of supporting enterprises upstream and downstream. In short, we need a great country. But this great country died last year and there is no hope for it. No matter how much funding is available, there's no way we could have built this aircraft carrier alone." The other party's words were so calm at the time, but the despair beneath the calmness could not be expressed with words. Now he could only sit at this small table and suck hard on his pipe, which was carved from hemlock. They all become a little hot due to the excessive burning of tobacco and the stimulation of huge amounts of nicotine. This Slavic tough guy couldn't help but say this with some self-abandonment, since The outcome is already determined. Why should I choose to cooperate with you? What benefits will this bring to me? Even if, as you said, they eventually break the contract, I can still get the deposit they paid now. Just pack it up and take it away. As far as I know, you don't intend to pay a penny, and you can't possibly come up with so much cash at once. I could have just fled to a western country with the money and lived the life of my dreams, just like my colleagues did, but it goes against your original ideal, doesn't it? Karl looked at the somewhat excited man in front of him and spoke calmly. Ideals, beliefs. General Vasily suddenly roared, like an angry brown bear. What's the point of saying this now? We can't even pay our proud army. Countless scientific research talents have been drained away like a faucet turned on. The military equipment has been resold all over the world. The Soviet Union has disappeared. The ideals and beliefs have long since fallen with the red flag. Don't tell me anymore, then. Why don't you join the team that's getting rich? Karl interrupted calmly. As a general with real power, countless people should have extended olive branches to you in this year, but you haven't accepted it yet. Don't rush to deny it, because where you are now has already proved what I just said. There is no shame in talking about ideals at any time. As you said, I won't pay a penny. There are now 2 ships fully loaded with necessities of life, canned vegetables and food, as well as necessary civilian fuel. It has already set sail from the port of Galleon. I'll give you 20 minutes to think about it. If you agree to the deal, we will use a tugboat to tow this ship away. As for the one next to it, she must disappear from this world. Ha. Ha. General. Vasily laughed wildly, slowly stood up from his chair, and then turned his head sharply to look at Karl and Cedric. He sneered with a ferocious look on his face. Then, you can go. If the results are the same, why should I choose to trade with you? Your price is lower. Unless you can offer something that those people can't, you can leave, of course. Karl looked at General Vasily with a ferocious face, took out a newspaper from his ring, and handed it to him. The moment the other party took it, he didn't say anything but just opened his lips slightly. But General Vasily just glanced at the newspaper in his hand and his eyes immediately widened, because it was a special edition of the Russian newspaper Pravda. He didn't even need to read the text carefully. The huge photo on the front page said it all. Just then he looked up and saw the young man's lips slightly opened, as if saying, the only special price I could possibly offer is to guarantee that this ship can be built. Chapter 221 The Last Job and Purchase Time. July 7th, Moscow. These and these. Pack all the drawings together and put them all in the container for me, as well as these important research resources. Their integrity must be checked. If they are lost, you should be able to guess what the consequences will be. Karl pointed at the blue drawing of the room and gave orders in a high-handed manner. Following behind him was Cedric, who was now wearing a Russian internal affairs uniform. With his right hand on his pistol holster, he scanned everyone present with the most stern gaze possible. A group of scientific researchers in white coats were busy as ordinary porters from time to time. He looked at the blonde boy standing at the door with fear. Early this morning, the other party brought the chica of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. He came to the research institute and asked all the staff to investigate the private sale of national defense information. All the drawings and materials about large ships and the use of gas turbines on ships that can be found are sorted and packaged. At first, the director of the institute wanted to retort, but was shot through the knee by this guy. Now he was lying there groaning in pain, and his ruthless shooting skills made everyone present recall it again. After that shot, no one in that organization, which had just been disbanded, raised a single word of objection. Everyone was busy collecting information, hoping that there would not be any gaps in the information. And looked nervously at the blonde boy with beautiful blue eyes. Even though he was not wearing the uniform of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, but everyone present always thought that the other party was more like a golden lion that was about to get angry. As for the policeman from the Ministry of Internal Affairs next to him, he was more like a groundhog who suddenly dug out of a hole and looked at the sky with a scrutinizing gaze. Is it really okay for us to do this? He looked at the laboratory director, who was still lying on the side, holding his right knee and groaning in pain. Cedric asked, whispering to Karl using magic, didn't You buy this dress I'm wearing at the black market yesterday? We were drinking with General Vasily the day before yesterday. Why did you bring me here today to collect these drawings and information? Once any of them makes a phone call, then we'll be completely exposed. Shut your stinky mouth, you big pumpkin-headed fool. Karl scolded loudly using the same magical voice transmission. I will do things that I'm not sure of. They will not have anyone to call the internal phone number to verify it. The reason is very simple, because the guy who was lying on the ground yesterday was holding a set of top secret missile blueprints and materials. They go to the black market, and if they make a phone call, they will die in the alleys of Moscow tomorrow. How did you know? Cedric asked in confusion. Karl turned his head slightly, looked at the other person, as if he was a fool, and asked back with disdain. Ah, you really stupid or just pretending to be stupid? When I went to buy this suit for you yesterday, the black boss's previous customer was you, isn't it him? The set of top secret missile blueprints and information is right next to your suit. Hearing this, Cedric was completely shocked, and at the same time a little unconvinced. He looked at Karl's profile and muttered softly, how can you blame me for not paying attention? It's because you insisted on drinking with those Chinese people. You got drunk 3 times in 5 days. If I hadn't helped you back to your room, you would still be in the open space in the shipyard. How about counting the stars in the sky? What are you complaining about again? Karl turned his head again to look at Cedric, who was complaining in a low voice, and sighed helplessly. Shut up. Today is the last day. Finish the work quickly and we can go back to England. I'll allow you to eat as much as you want during lunch. Now make your look more threatening. Your look right now doesn't look like that of a police officer from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. It looks more like someone whose cake has been stolen. A kid having a tantrum. You are a child. A willful and arrogant child. Cedric complained quietly, then tried to make his eyes look more fierce. But no matter how hard he tried, it always seemed a little off, like taking a cute brown teddy bear and then giving it the most ferocious look. Outsiders will just think it's cute. Fortunately, the researchers in the room were in no mood to care about those 2 killers. The whole room was filled with the director's wails, even though the bullet only pierced his knee and did not damage his major blood vessels. However, the blood flowing from the wound still made the smell of blood spread. The researchers nervously put everything together, and finally a female staff member handed a compiled catalog to Cole with trembling hands. Sir, all the information catalogs are here. There is nothing missing. I hope you can take a closer look. We will never betray our motherland. Please rest assured. Karl glanced at the catalog in his hand, then at the female staff member, who was obviously suffering from long-term malnutrition. The brown red hair was already split, and the young and beautiful skin also looked a little dry. So Karl put the catalog directly into his ring in front of everyone, then took out his wand and waved it lightly. The information that had been packed and organized with nylon ropes flew automatically into the handbag in Cedric's left hand like snowflakes. This magical scene left everyone present stunned. While everyone's attention was drawn, Karl took out his wand, aimed it at everyone and whispered, "Stupefy." Fainted. A silver light instantly enveloped the entire room. When the light faded away, only the researchers sleeping soundly were left on the floor and a set of Internal Affairs Ministry uniform thrown casually on the ground. The 2 young men appeared in a Georgian restaurant next to the Kremlin without anyone noticing. As soon as the 2 sat down, the waiter immediately brought the prepared Georgian food to them. The fragrant Georgian barbecue, paired with the unique walnut sauce, is mouth-watering just by looking at it. But Cedric, who was sitting next to him, showed no intention of eating until the waiter left. Karl on the side looked at him and smiled helplessly. What's wrong? Do you think we did something bad again? No. Cedric shook his head seriously, then remained silent for a while before speaking again. I just counted your income in the past month and made a comparison. My income? Karl smiled doubtfully. What's wrong with my income? Although I don't make much, it shouldn't be a big problem to support you. This has nothing to do with me, Cedric said seriously, and then took out a familiar cashier's check from the First Savings Bank of the Wizarding World from his coat pocket. He handed it to Karl and said seriously, I Want to buy half a day of your time? Chapter 222, Winning the Lottery. What does this mean? Karl looked at the bank draft he had given to the other party half a month ago. He looked at Cedric in confusion. Cedric had a very serious expression on his face. In fact, at the beginning, I really just wanted to accompany you through this journey, but all the way down, although the journey was still fun, I don't think it can be called a real journey. We were doing deals along the way, in America, in Germany, all over the land. It wasn't so much a journey. I think a more appropriate way of saying it is that I accompanied you on a long business trip. So during that bet, I just had a vague idea that I wanted to win some money from you, and you said to buy a day of your time. The reason for this number is that I did a simple calculation before. Based on all your transactions in the British wizarding world, this amount of money is exactly your entire income for the day. It's a fair trade and the price is right. This is what you have always taught me. Then why has it become half a day now? Cole was silent for a while and asked again. Cedric didn't hesitate. He asked the waiter for a napkin and took out the pen he carried with him. On that soft napkin, a bunch of complicated formulas were listed, and after substituting a series of complex numbers he calculated a result and handed it to Karl. This is a calculation process I just went through in my mind. If there are no major mistakes, I think the money will be mine now, converted into gold galleons according to the exchange rate of the first savings bank of the magical world. It might only be enough to buy half a day's worth of food. You can check my calculation process and point out any mistakes. Karl looked at the ink marks on the restaurant paper and couldn't help but nod his approval of all the people he had known in the past. Perhaps only Professor Snape could possess such exquisite calculation skills. He looked at Cedric's slightly larger head. I'm impressed by this pumpkin brain. Although it only has a single core processor, this single core still holds many surprises waiting for his discovery point. But as Carol was looking at him, Cedric seemed to ask again with some urgency, "Are there any loopholes? Do you agree to the deal?" These words drew Carol's gaze back to the other person's face, the face that usually always had a warm smile and was full of innocence. Now there was a hint of unspeakable urgency between his brows, and he couldn't help but laugh. And then he said to the waiter who had just walked not far away. He waved gently, and when the other person came over, he whispered a few words in his ear. Soon the waiter came over with a box of breadsticks covered with various butters and placed it on the table between Karl and Cedric. Then he left happily with the $1,000 tip Karl gave him. They also began to guide the diners around to leave. In less than half a minute, Karl and Cedric were the only two people left in the entire restaurant. Sitting next to the window close to the street. Outside the window is the Moscow street, which still looks a bit gloomy and cold even in midsummer. Don't be anxious, my dear senior. Karl had a wicked smile on his face and pointed at the breadstick in the black porcelain. It's really hard to weigh half a day. Is it 12 hours or a morning and an afternoon? I think one day is better. Considering your limited financial resources, you can try discounts and promotions. It would seem that my time is worthless, so we can't play a game. You lost a round before. Now, I'm giving you a chance to make a comeback. Among this box of breadsticks, there is one that is the most unique. You just have to draw that one. Then I will give you the same amount of money. According to the number you just calculated, it can just buy one day of my time. Let me remind you, you only have about 15 minutes to consider, because according to the current growth rate of my wealth, after 15 minutes, you will win the bet. You can't buy me a day either, because you still need 547.6 gold galleons. Cedric opened his mouth slightly, looked at Karl's smirk, and then looked at the box of breadsticks. He scratched his head and thought for a long time, but still had no intention of taking action. Seeing that the other party hadn't taken any action for a long time, Carol felt inexplicably anxious in his heart, so much so that he blurted out what he was saying inadvertently. "Dear Mr. Diggory, please make a decision as soon as possible. Time is limited. If you continue to hesitate, there will be no hope, and, judging by the current situation, unless there are major changes in world finance, I will suddenly go bankrupt. Otherwise, with your current income level, I will never have such an opportunity in my life, so you must seize it." This statement is well reasoned and explains both the rarity of the current opportunity and the terrible consequences of losing the opportunity point, but even so, Cedric still sat there silently, his eyes fixed on the box of bread. Unlike before, he was not in a daze at this moment, but was calculating nervously. The aroma from his nose told him that there should be 2 flavors of cream in it, one with a strong strawberry flavor and the other with a light passion fruit flavor. If he guessed correctly, the breadstick dipped in passion fruit cream was the winning number this time. But there were 15 breadsticks in front of him, and through smell analysis, he could roughly identify the one with passion fruit flavored cream. It should be located in the lower left corner of the container. After the approximate range is framed, Cedric is like a determined groundhog. He stared at the 6 breadsticks in the lower left corner, as if trying to see through the black porcelain surface. But even if he kept not blinking for a whole minute, tears would well up in his eyes due to eye fatigue. But you can still only determine the last 4 goals, which is a 1/4 chance, no matter how good you are at math. Now, we can only listen to the judgment of the god of probability. There's no need to be so nervous. Hurry up and do it. Time is running out. If you don't do something, we will have to go back to England tomorrow. What's so good about a pile of bread? Why are you just standing there in a daze? While Cedric was desperately brainstorming, Karl, who was standing beside him, could only urge him anxiously for some reason. Finally, in the last few seconds of 15 minutes, he suddenly reached out and grabbed one of the breadsticks. Then he nervously pulled it out, but the moment the end left the porcelain, he despaired. The bright red cream at the bottom of the breadstick and the aroma coming from above indicate that this is a breadstick dipped in strawberry cream. Countless calculations ultimately succumbed to the judgment of the god of probability. Cedric held up this carefully selected breadstick. He sat in his seat with a depressed look on his face, looking at the sky with blurry eyes, as if the world had turned grey at that moment. Until a crisp breaking sound came from his hand. Cedric, who was looking up at the sky, then retracted his gaze and saw the breadstick in his hand. I don't know who bit off most of it, but Cole was still chewing it. He spat out the breadcrumbs and said this with a nonchalant look on his face. Congratulations on winning the prize, Mr. Cedric. You picked the most unique breadstick because of the one in your hand. It's the shortest one in the box. Tomorrow, I will belong to you alone. Chapter 223. 2 people living on the streets. At 7 o'clock in the morning, in the city of Moscow, downstairs of an unknown Khrushchev building. Cedric tore the black bread in front of him into small pieces and soaked them in the borscht in front of him. In the hope that this warm red color can soak the carbohydrates, which are as hard as bricks, into a little softer texture. He was now in a standard Soviet-style residential area, with the square Khrushchev building standing in front. The exterior walls are painted with grey chalk and looked like reinforced concrete coffins. There were not many pedestrians on the community roads in the early morning, and among the deserted shops, only this breakfast shop was open. The owner is a retired veteran who once served in the Far East. He learned how to make borscht in the army, as well as steamed buns and fried dough sticks that are commonly eaten in the eastern countries. Drinking a bowl of hot and thick soup in the morning, paired with meaty and oily steamed buns and fried dough sticks, can be said to be a wonderful thing. This was indeed the case a few months ago. The great Soviet Union collapsed, and the long suppressed private capital forces began to flourish. Various small private shops had sprung up, and people no longer have to queue up early in the morning to go to state-owned stores or canteens enduring the waiter's sarcasm and roaring service. Everyone believed that they had a better future. Until time slowly passed, everything became bad, led by the boy gang headed by Gator. Shock therapy began to be implemented throughout Russia. Their starting point was very simple and full of the bold personality of the Slavs. Simply put, those bigwigs believed that the Soviet economy had reached its end. It's all because of the planned economy. As long as the market economy is introduced, everything will be fine. So they began to promote the privatization of state-owned enterprises on a large scale, and at the same time, to compensate for the Soviet era. For employees who own equity in state-owned enterprises, a financial certificate similar to equity bonds will be issued directly to them, based on their equity. The result was that these workers who knew nothing about finance, were completely at a loss when looking at the financial coupons they were given. However, due to the ulterior motives of some people, the value of these bonds depreciated rapidly, and along with it, there was a shortage of goods and soaring prices. Everyone was anxious to cash in these bonds, and in just half a year, more than $1 trillion worth of Soviet state assets were cashed in. In the end, it was sold for less than $80 billion. The entire working class went bankrupt, and the country's economy was paralyzed. Even this shabby community store was affected. Whenever Cedric tried to sneak an extra spoonful of yogurt into his borscht, he would receive a death stare from the store owner. Helplessly, he could only lower his head and vigorously stir the thick soup in front of him, while enduring Karl opposite him. His face was full of sarcasm, but he didn't seem to be resistant to today's breakfast, and drank the bright red soup spoonful by spoonful. The iron hard rye bread seemed to suit his taste. But the more this happened, the more guilty Cedric felt. The day before yesterday, they were still staying in the most luxurious hotel in Moscow. I used to enjoy the service of a private restaurant, but now I can only eat at the roadside stalls in the community. Eating the thick soup without any fillings, and eating the hard rye bread. I'm sorry? Cedric apologized softly in English. What did you say? Karl deliberately turned his ear to the side and asked again, as if he didn't hear clearly. What did you just say? If you are saying that someone took away the £1,000 of cash that he had saved with great difficulty just because I went to the front desk to pay the bill, run to the state-owned bank across from the restaurant, and convert it all into rubles at the current official exchange rate. They didn't take into account that the official exchange rate, based on the black market price, was less than 1% of the real exchange rate. We now have less than £10 worth of rubles, and have to spend a whole day on the streets of Moscow. Then, there's no need for me to accept your apology. After all, my time today belongs entirely to you, and I provide the most perfect company. But I also need to remind you, Mr. Cedric Diggory, that this service will end in 23 hours. What are your plans? Let us use the little money you have. The activity will end tonight. At the same time, give a little reminder, today's actual exchange rate is about 20% lower than yesterday. What? Cedric lost his grip on the spoon when he heard the bad news, and it fell directly into the thick soup in front of him. The scalded soup splashed all over his face, making his already depressed face look even more miserable. Until a hand used a brown scarf to carefully wipe the soup off his face. According to our agreement, today's schedule was to go somewhere and do something. It should be your decision. After all, you are the one who spends the money. But in this situation, I guess we will have to wait until after breakfast. The little money you have may not be enough to support the two of us until the end of the day, even if we are just buying drinking water. I am a very principled person. It is impossible for me to spend a penny today to improve our lives, so please make a decision as soon as possible and find a way to keep us alive first. Karl said calmly as he gently wiped the soup off Cedric's face. Cedric was quite happy with Karl's service at first, but then he heard what the other party said next. He immediately became embarrassed again. His anxiety made him scratch his head and face, and his appearance made the stall owner next to him think he was crazy. Can drinking borscht drive people crazy? At the end of breakfast, Cole took out a newspaper from his pocket and handed it to Cedric. Pointing to the recruitment advertisement in the corner. Under the current situation, we can only do temporary work to see if we can get 3 meals a day. As for sightseeing and the like, let's think about it after we're full. Of course, all this requires your decision. You are the protagonist today. Please make the decision, Mr. Diggory. Cedric's eyes lit up instantly, and he began to nervously look for a suitable target among the pile of job advertisements. Finally, he pointed to a job advertisement at the bottom. We're going here. The cafeteria of Moscow State University? Carol said puzzledly, looking at the recruitment advertisement. Yes, that's right. Cedric immediately analyzed. It's the university cafeteria. There will be no problem helping with 3 meals a day, and I'm sure I'll be able to eat enough. More importantly, Moscow State University is one of the famous attractions in Moscow. After work, we were able to look around the university, which also fulfilled our travel goals for today. You are really a smart kid. Karl stroked Cedric's big head and praised him enthusiastically. But he changed the subject and spoke again with a stern face. But it would be better if we could regain some of our IQ before exchanging the currency. After the verbal sarcasm, the two finished their breakfast and left the stall quickly, their speed comparable to a 100-meter race. The reason why I ran so fast was to run before the breakfast owner could count the money he had earned. After all, the £10 exchanged for rubles yesterday seemed to be not enough for a breakfast. Chapter 224. Two thieves in the cafeteria. 1 Khrushchev meatball, 1 strawberry mushroom soup, and half a spoonful of sour cream. Right. Karl looked at the silver-haired Russian girl in front of him, smiled gently, and asked in standard British English. After the other party nodded, he turned around and handed the written menu to Cedric in the kitchen with an expressionless face. He switched to the expression of a vicious leader and urged urgently, "Hurry up, others are still waiting for their meals. With your speed, it's no wonder others don't want to hire you. Got it?" Cedric glared at Karl aggrievedly, turned around and started serving him food. In order to express his indignation and unyielding determination, he decided to do something while serving the meal. But instead of spitting from the customer's dish like a traditional waiter would, he ordered a portion of 6 Khrushchev meatballs. He ate 2 without leaving any trace, then wiped the gravy from the corner of his mouth while giving a standard professional fake smile. He handed the plate to the Russian girl and spoke in broken Russian. "Enjoy your meal. Thank you for your service, sir. Of course it would be better if you didn't steal my meatballs." The girl took the plate, smiled and answered in standard English. Cedric was left with no choice but to look at Karl awkwardly while the other was serving the next customer with a smile as warm as the sun. After asking about the other party's dining needs, he turned around and continued to yell at Cedric in a sarcastic tone. 2 portions of spalu luncheon meat, a whole portion of black bread, half a spoonful of sour cream and vulgar sturgeon caviar. Hurry up, you lazy idiot. Coming. Cedric, who witnessed all this, shouted angrily, turned around and plunged into the kitchen, starting to work intensely. So 2 people stood at the front desk, communicating intimately with customers with smiles as warm as the sun. Writing down each menu and sending it to the kitchen. One person is wearing a full chef's uniform in the high summer temperature of late July. I worked hard in the kitchen and sweat soaked my white chef's uniform. I finished work at 2 p.m. Cedric looked like he had been fished out of a swimming pool. He sat on the steps in the kitchen, his head down, gasping for breath. "Why should I fry meatballs in the kitchen while you can serve at the front desk? This is not fair," Cedric yelled in dissatisfaction. However, Karl glared at the other person with disdain and complained expressionlessly, "Who told you to be so adorably stupid that you came here with just a newspaper to apply for a job as a temporary cafeteria worker at a German university? Do you know that when your perfect English came out, we might have been suspected of being spies a year ago? Go to the Lubyanka Hotel and enjoy the massage service of the great memory restoration technique." When Karl thought of this, he became angrier and angrier. Sometimes he really admired the naivety of his senior. I remember that the other party took the recruitment information in the newspaper and ran directly to the security booth of Moscow State University. He spoke to the security guard in military uniform in perfect English. "Hello, I heard they are hiring here. Can I apply?" Karl, who was following behind him and still thinking about how to lie about his identity, was completely stunned when he saw this scene. He could only look at the tall, thin security guard and Cedric with a silly smile on his face. While silently reaching out his right hand towards his pistol holster. Fortunately, it was just the end of the get out of class at noon, and among the people coming and going, there happened to be several language professors from the international college. They heard Cedric trying to communicate with the security guard in English, so they walked over curiously. Karl also hurried forward, without giving Cedric any chance to speak, and immediately combined the 2 people's British passports. They made up a plausible sounding story that the 2 men were tourists from England visiting Russia. When I was traveling in a border town, my wallet was accidentally stolen, and now I'm starving. So I wanted to come to the university, to do odd jobs, to earn 3 meals a day, before going to the British Embassy, to ask for help. When telling this story, Karl also used his magical acting skills, which was so tear-jerking and touching. But these are the most important things. The most important thing is that Karol expressed it in standard Russian at the end of the story. The two of us don't want any salary. We just need to provide 3 meals a day, and my Russian level is pretty good. We can provide free oral communication for language learners of international colleges in this way, with the guarantee of several professors from the international college. The two were able to successfully enter Moscow State University. I worked as a part-time worker in the cafeteria of the International Language School. Cole was thinking about this, and Cedric was also thinking about this in his mind. He lowered his head and looked at the black shadow on the white steps. He could no longer tell whether it was his own shadow or his own sweat. Yesterday he was full of confidence and wanted to take over Karl's role and become the person in charge of planning today's schedule. But now he has messed up everything. If it weren't for Karol's help, the two of them might still be starving on the streets of Moscow. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but say it with some self-abandonment. I so useless, Karl. I screwed up everything. The whole plan has become a complete failure from the beginning. I really seem to be very useless. Just like you said, I'm just a clumsy fool. Cedric curled up into a ball, hugged his knees with his hands, and buried his head deep in his thighs, like a puppy that had just been bullied by a bad owner. But he never seemed to receive any comfort from his master. Half a minute later, he was greeted by a sudden chill from behind. Cedric, who had just curled up in a ball, was startled by the sudden appearance of the cold thorn. He stood up from the stairs screaming, turned around and saw Karl holding a bottle of steaming Coca-Cola. Looking at himself with a smirk. What happened to you just now? You curled up like a threatened pangolin. Did someone bully you? Karl sat down slowly and handed the Coca-Cola in his hand to Cedric. Looking at the other's strange expression. Asked with doubt. Cedric took the bottle of ice-cold Coca-Cola, opened it without hesitation, and took a sip. The moment the cold sweet liquid slid down his throat. He suddenly felt that his self-pity just now seemed really stupid and a little ridiculous. I'm asking you a question. What were you thinking about just now when you curled up in a ball? Karl asked again while drinking Coke. Nothing. Cedric looked embarrassed and quickly changed the subject. By the way, where did you get this Coke from? I didn't see it in the cafeteria. Don't even think about stealing it. Karl said calmly. Luxury items like this are certainly not available in the cafeteria. Just like what you did in the kitchen just now. I also found a way to secretly take it out from the freezer in the staff cafeteria. Chapter 225 Afternoon Peace. Cedric was stunned at first, then his expression immediately changed, and he looked at Karl seriously. What are you talking about? What did you just say? You said you stole things from the kitchen just like me. When have I ever stolen anything from the kitchen? This is slander, and I warn you not to slander me. Is it? Karl also turned to look at Cedric and gently patted the other's soft belly with his left hand. Then, I would like to ask Mr. Diggory, under this layer of soft and greasy fat, aren't there 18 crushed chef meatballs and 6 small portions of Spaloo luncheon meat, and 3 tablespoons of sour cream, and various other small treats? How did you know? Cedric blurted out in surprise, but the moment he said it, he couldn't help but regret it and wanted to go back on his words. No, nothing. Karl didn't listen to his explanation. He just sat down on the steps and patted the empty steps next to him with his hands. Sit down. There is no need to discuss these issues during your leisure time after work. Can't we just quietly enjoy the scenery? Isn't this the tourist attraction you decided on? Cedric didn't argue again and sat next to Karl obediently. After the other person sat down, Karl raised his Coca-Cola glass bottle and took the initiative to clink glasses with Cedric. Cheers to our extraordinary journey. Thanks. Cedric was a little confused by this sudden action. After being in a daze for a long time, he finally managed to say thank you. Karol did not respond to him, but just sat quietly on the steps, drinking iced cola, and looking at the campus in the distance. Point in the embrace of summer, Moscow State University presents an unparalleled scenery, as if a vivid canvas slowly unfolds in the field of vision. Point the sunlight shines through the clouds, gently caressing the historic academic hall. With the golden light and the red brick walls reflecting each other. Point it exudes a solemn and ancient atmosphere. The breeze blows, and the leaves sway gently, as if whispering the long river of history. Point in the distance, you can see students gathered in groups of 3 or 4 in the square in front of the teaching building, some discussing academic issues, and some enjoying the warm summer sun. Point their shadows are elongated in the sunlight, and blend into the surrounding environment, forming a harmonious picture. Point also at the back door of the cafeteria. 2 teenagers were sitting on the steps, under the shade of the trees, sitting together quietly, looking into the distance, calm and peaceful. Don't be too self-deprecating. You didn't mess everything up. At least you chose this attraction. Now, it looks pretty good, doesn't it? Carol suddenly spoke, his voice lacking the usual hint of sarcasm, but full of seriousness and solemnity. Cedric, who was still admiring the beautiful scenery, looked at the other person in surprise, only to see the summer breeze blowing up the other person's long golden hair. The sunlight enveloped the boy's face, giving his handsome face a layer of light. The trees in the distance sway gracefully in the wind. Summer afternoons are always quiet and beautiful, but I still messed up the plan, didn't I? Cedric sighed after a long silence. I can't think of every detail as well as you do, and the plans you make are so perfect. Even if an emergency suddenly occurred, it could be handled perfectly. But what about me? There was only one mistake in the plan. I just messed up myself. I'm really a flustered idiot. Yes, you are an idiot. Karl spoke again, and drank the Coca-Cola in his hand. Ice cold carbonated drinks always bring people great comfort in the summer, and he burped with satisfaction. Then he threw the glass bottle aside in a very uncivilized manner, turned to look at Cedric, stared into his eyes, and said very seriously, "But, you're not a fool, are you? Are you praising me or scolding me?" Cedric didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Karl said with a very serious expression, "I don't mean to praise or scold you. We are now in one of the world's top universities. We might as well discuss this issue with an academic attitude. You think you're a fool for not having thought about a question, seemingly for the first time in your life. Make a plan for your life for the next day according to your own ideas. What do you mean?" Cedric also became serious. Karl continued, speaking calmly. "The meaning is very simple. Although today looks the same as usual, it is very different for you. In fact, many people don't realize that they often spend the first 20 years of their lives living under certain rules that have been set by others. Plan your life step by step. When you are young, listen to your parents. When you go to school, listen to your teachers. When you start working, listen to your boss. Elementary school, junior high school, college, children, teenagers, adolescents, adults, graduation. We have invented countless words to describe different stages of life and set an age as the legal age of adulthood, but it doesn't make sense. No one who walks out of college instantly becomes an adult. He may not know how to tie his shirt. He may not know how to go to the doctor alone. He may not know how to interact with strangers. He should have started to become confused, at a loss, and then tripped over low-level, tiny mistakes. In the end, you started to become a little self-destructive, just like you are now, like a brainless idiot. How can you say that? You're too much, Karl. Cedric growled a little angrily. Karl showed a satisfied smile, patted Cedric on the shoulder, and gave a thumbs up. You are angry. That's right. You should be angry at those who stand by and watch and make sarcastic remarks. Use the most vulgar and vicious words to curse them, because these people are of no help to your life. Their gossip will only fill your life with negative energy. The only thing you have to do is curse them harshly, then live your life well. As for the mistakes you made before, they are just minor incidents. After saying that, Karl patted Cedric on the back, stood up and stretched, leaving Cedric alone. Sitting on the steps in a daze. After a brief thought, Cedric suddenly looked at Karl and asked with some confusion, Thank you for your comfort just now, but I found something wrong. It's my first time in the Muggle world. I feel lost and overwhelmed when it comes to making plans for my day. Then you should have had the same feeling when you first entered the magical world. From what I heard, you didn't seem to have any difficulty adapting at all. You just said so much. Are you just trying to comfort me? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 226. We are all ordinary people. You fart. Karl suddenly jumped up from the ground, pointed at Cedric with a red face, and said excitedly like a machine gun, "What do you mean by simply wanting to comfort you? What are you dreaming about? I just told you so much just to educate you, to prevent my carefully trained subordinates from losing confidence because of such a small matter. If that happens, I will be at a great loss. This is all out of personal gain. Please don't take it for granted, Mr. Diggory. Watch your words. Outside, I'm your boss and leader." "What? Boss and leader?" Cedric also shouted excitedly, a little confused by Karl's words. Zio Temper also got a little angry and stood up from the steps, confronted the other person's eyes, and spoke angrily. "Today, you are not Karl Hohenzollern. Your time today has been purchased by me. I'm your boss today. You are the one who should be careful with your words. Answer my question immediately. When you first entered the magical world, why didn't you feel as helpless as you described? You." Karl pointed at Cedric, his eyes twitching wildly. "What are you talking about? Answer the question quickly, Mr. Hohenzollern." Cedric showed determination. This might be the toughest he had faced Karl in this year. Those eyes were fixed on each other, like an owl seeing a mouse in the dark night. Karl looked at the pair of stubborn eyes, and knew very well that the other party had begun to get stuck on this issue. It seemed that I had to give an answer today, so I sighed helplessly. He sat back on the steps and spoke in a calm tone. "I think if you haven't forgotten, you should be clear about my first identity. When I entered the British wizarding world, I am a prisoner of the Ministry of Magic. You should be able to guess by now that I was caught by those scumbags of the Ministry of Magic on purpose. Besides my own considerations, there is another very important reason why I did this. It is for this reason that I was able to act confident and at ease when I first stepped into the magical world." "What reason?" Cedric also sat back on the steps and asked expectantly. "The reason is very simple. I had already guessed at that time that my background was definitely not simple. Principal Dumbledore must have a close relationship with me. I have a very powerful backer." Karl had a wicked smile on his face and looked at Cedric and said slowly, "Gone." After waiting for about half a minute, Karl still had no intention of continuing. Cedric looked at the face with confusion, like a woodpecker that had just woken up. "That's all." Karl spread his hands and nodded resolutely. "What else do you want to hear? Something about long hours of hard study. It's the experience gained from working independently in society for many years, or it's some kind of innate talent." At this point, Karl stretched out a finger and placed it in front of Cedric's eyes and said sincerely, "There aren't so many fancy reasons. You just need to observe carefully and find the most unreasonable child in the family. He must be the most favored by his parents and the most shameless colleague in the company. He must have a strong backer from a leader. When you peel off the surface of all complicated things, what is revealed is nothing but simple truths. Because I have a strong backing, so I can do whatever I want in the British wizarding world. Cornelius, Fudge and the like are still not good enough in front of Dumbledore." "I thought so." Cedric lowered his head regretfully. Obviously, this answer did not match his imagination. Karl looked at Cedric, who seemed a little regretful and felt that he was a little cruel to him, so he just reached out his hand to comfort him. All I could hear was Cedric muttering softly with his head lowered. "I thought you had some unique secret. It seems I overestimated you, Mr. Karl Hohenzollern." "What did you say?" Karl was so angry that his right hand, which was about to touch and comfort him, turned into a fierce attack and grabbed Cedric, who was sitting on the ground pretending to be pitiful. He pulled him up directly from the stairs, stared at the other person with his blue eyes, and questioned loudly, "I taught you with good intentions, and this is how you repay me? You are such a heartless person. On the plane to the United States, I should have thrown you, who were sleeping like a dead pig, from the plane into the Atlantic Ocean. Isn't what I said the truth?" Cedric seemed to have finally found the feeling of being a boss, and responded unusually toughly. "In fact, I had already guessed your answer before you answered, but I couldn't believe that your answer would be so vulgar. It seems that I had imagined you too well before. You are just an ordinary person, dear Mr. Hohenzollern. It seems that you are not the omnipotent god in the eyes of your admirers. I'm not a god, nor am I perfect. Do you think this answer satisfies you?" Karl sat back on the steps with his arms folded, an expression that said "I'm angry" all over his face. Cedric looked at the angry face, then calmly sat back on the steps, looking at the campus in the sunshine in the distance. He said calmly, "I am very satisfied with this answer. You are an ordinary person, not a god. Coincidentally, I'm also an ordinary person." Karl turned his head slowly, only to see a big face full of smiles that looked a little silly. As time passed, the sun gradually set, and the clouds in the sky were dyed with a touch of light purple and orange. As dusk slowly approaches, the scenery of Moscow State University becomes more charming. The afterglow of the setting sun dyed the entire campus a warm orange-red color, and the ancient buildings appeared more solemn and mysterious under this soft light. The church bell tower in the distance, set against the backdrop of a sunset, looks like a watchman guarding this palace of knowledge. Some students began packing their bags to go home, while others chose to stay on campus and enjoy this rare moment of tranquility. They strolled along the paths on campus, or sat by the lake, quietly watching the sunset reflected on the water, enjoying the beautiful time given by nature. For example, the two teenagers on the steps didn't know how long they had been sitting there leaning against each other. All I can see is the bright blue sky, which is slowly dyed golden by time. "It's time to go to work." Cedric slowly stood up and stretched, patting Karl, who was still sitting there enjoying the beautiful viewpoint. But just as he opened the door leading to the cafeteria's kitchen, his other hand was grabbed forcefully by someone on the ground. He slowly turned around and saw the other person holding two student ID cards, putting a finger on his lips and speaking in lip language. "Forget about going to work. There is a party tonight. Do you want to go?" Chapter 227. The end of youth is the party on the playground. "Is this really okay for us? And where did you get these two student ID cards?" At the door of the music room of the International Language Academy, Cedric followed Karl nervously, watching the other party twist a wire in the keyhole. He kept asking nervously, while Karl seemed a little impatient. He turned around and glared at the other person fiercely. Then he returned his attention to the keyhole, and while continuing to twist the wire in the keyhole, he stretched out his left hand and gestured behind him. "Pass me the crowbar. This is not good." Cedric's face was full of nervousness, but his hands did not stop moving, and he handed a crowbar to Karl. Karl pinned the crowbar to the joint of the door handle, and turned to look at Cedric with his signature smirk on his face. "Well, dear Mr. Diggory, now's the boss today. You can decide whether we should open this door or not. If you decide not to open this door, we'll go back now, and you can go to the back kitchen to fry your meatballs. I continue to work as a waiter at the front desk. That's not good. After all, it's considered stealing. Using a fake passport to enter a national university is already a crime, but what if someone finds out? It's okay. Missile blueprints and information can be bought on the black market. Stealing a few musical instruments is nothing." The two of them masked and answered each other like this, and Cedric's nervous expression gradually became firm. He stomped his feet with a ruthless heart and nodded. "Then do it, but you must return the things in the end. I'm definitely not a shameful thief." "Of course." Karl kicked the crowbar, but instead of the loud noise he had imagined, he heard a crisp sound of metal breaking. The door of the music room slowly opened, and it did not look like the clean and tidy music hall as imagined. The moment the door opened, under the golden light of the setting sun, a layer of blinding dust greeted us. There were many different kinds of musical instruments scattered on the ground, including the common western saxophones, trombones, cornets, and violins. There are also some orchestral instruments from Southeast Asian island countries, as well as the ukulele commonly used by Hawaiian natives. One of the grand pianos took up most of the room, its smooth and neat black paint surface covered with a thick layer of dust. Karl slid his finger lightly over it, and a mark immediately appeared on the surface of the piano. Looking at the scene in the room, he sneered and said somewhat self-deprecatingly, "It seems we have come to the wrong place, boss. These junk may not sell for a good price." "What, boss?" Cedric glared at Karl and began to carefully select from a pile of musical instruments. "If I were you, I would usually choose cello or violin, at least when performing. It can temporarily cover up the characteristics of a fool." Karl looked at the busy Cedric and gave advice in a serious tone. "Get lost," Cedric said unhappily. "Don't forget who you are today. You are the boss today. You're the clumsy fool." "Yes, yes, yes." Karl kept waving his hands to show that he surrendered and wanted to end the topic quickly, then sat down in the chair next to the piano. Looking at Cedric with his big bud sticking out, he looked like a groundhog looking for food in a carrot field. Rummaging through a pile of dusty western musical instruments, the sunset in the window next to me gradually changed from brilliant gold to blood red. The sun in the distance is burning its last bit of heat, trying to leave this last ray of light on the earth. Even though night was almost falling, the hard-working groundhog seemed to have not found his food yet. A melodious music came to my ears, and the air seemed to freeze under the afterglow of the setting sun. Carol's shadow was stretched out long. His fingertips danced on the keyboard. On a summer night in Moscow. It turns into notes and flows out slowly. Cedric, who had been concentrating on searching, stood there in surprise, looking at Karl quietly. The sound of the accordion echoed in this small space, and every movement of the player seemed so powerful and emotional. From his relaxed brows, one could tell that for him, this performance was a piece of cake. When the last note slowly faded into the air, he looked at the surprised Cedric and smiled that wicked smile again. "When did you learn to play the accordion?" Cedric asked excitedly after enjoying the music. "I didn't learn it." Karl wiped the dust off the accordion and said calmly, "Ah, you lying?" Cedric pouted angrily. "I didn't lie to you." Karl shrugged helplessly and hung the clean accordion around his neck. Then he grabbed Cedric and ran towards the playground. Cedric kept asking questions along the way, but Karol's answer remained the same. In fact, he was not lying. It was because he had never really learned it. He was just using the memory palace in his mind. The movements of the accordion player who was performing several songs in a band in a restaurant a few days ago were perfectly replicated. He always keeps his word, at least in front of others. He rarely lies. Coming to the playground of the International College, the summer night dotted with stars looks like a dream. The cool breeze carries the secrets of the night, blowing gently across every inch of land. An extraordinary social event unfolded here, and its unique charm attracted a lot of attention. As soon as Karol arrived at the venue, he immediately walked over to the Russian teenagers with his accordion. After a brief exchange in fluent Russian, he returned to Cedric and took him with him as they walked into the crowd. "What did you just tell them?" "Of course it is Mr. Degore's least favorite deal. I stated that I'm attending this party as a performer, in exchange for the right for me and my good eater partner to eat and drink for free here. Of course, you are the boss today, so if you feel it is inappropriate, we can leave." Karl looked at Cedric with a smile, and the other touched his face awkwardly. He also wanted to be tougher, but when he saw the barbecue grill and countless desserts and puddings at the party. Cedric waved his hand quickly to urge Karl to speak. "You should go and perform. I'm fine being alone." Karol, who was driven away, was not angry. He held the bay, an accordion produced by the Moscow Musical Instrument Experimental Factory. He came to the center of the crowd and started playing without any stage fright or hesitation. The boy's hands danced on the keyboard and every note seemed to be given life. A cheerful and rhythmic melody flowed and his golden hair shone in the nightlight. As the rhythm of the music changed, students joined in the dance, some spinning gracefully, others dancing passionately, and the entire venue turned into a sea of joy. But there are exceptions, such as a little badger who is concentrating on eating at the buffet table. As the night deepened, the atmosphere of the social gathering became more lively. The blonde boy skillfully changed the tune from a lively dance music to a gentle serenade. Let everyone feel the romance and warmth of the summer night. When the moon reached its highest point, the blonde boy slowly stopped playing and danced to the tired boys and girls. They also gradually began to rest. They sat together in groups of 3 or 5, talking and laughing. Karl tiredly put the accordion aside and hugged his sore shoulders until he felt someone kicking his back. He slowly turned his head and saw Cedric, with a flushed face, holding a plate of freshly baked meat. She looked at him with drunken eyes and a silly smile when the plate was handed to her. "This is my reward to you, boss. Eat it quickly. Your performance is really good." Cedric put his hands on his hips and raised his head slightly, intending to take advantage of the last moment to fully demonstrate his role as the boss today. As a result, before he could finish his words, he fell into Carol's arms, smelling the strong smell of alcohol on the other person. Karl could only sigh helplessly. It seemed that the other person was still bewitched by the appearance of those desserts. The Russian desserts are not as simple as they seem. Holding the dinner plate in one hand and holding Cedric in the other, he had no choice but to put his dinner on the grass. "I was going to make arrangements for Cedric first, but I didn't expect that he just moved his butt." The drunkard threw himself to the ground, but the soft grass didn't hurt him much. Cole was pressed on the grass and looked up at the sky. Listening to the slight snoring sound coming from beside his ear, he turned his head to look at the red profile of the face and spoke slowly in a very small voice. "T. Monko, Kotopo C6 Tit Heomon, Niyepe, Titiokni Wamer, HN Combe Seat." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.